Tonight, we are going to a mountain. Not just any mountain. A mountain whose very name is a confession. A mountain so charged with ancient oath-keeping that heaven itself could not ignore what happened there. 200 angels stood on its summit, looked down at the world below, and made one decision that would change everything. Tonight, you are going to understand exactly what that decision was, who made it, what it cost them, and why it still matters to every soul who reads the Book of Enoch under the night sky. Settle in. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow. We are going to Mount Hermon together. Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision you already knew was irreversible? That moment when you can still turn back, but something in you chooses not to? Imagine 200 beings of pure light, creatures who had stood before the throne of God since before the stars were hung in the sky, beings who had watched Adam breathe his first breath, who had witnessed the naming of every creature in Eden, who had never once tasted hunger, loneliness, or longing until they looked down, until they saw the daughters of men walking in the early light of the earth, and something shifted in 200 ancient hearts that had never shifted before. What happened next is one of the most astonishing events recorded in the whole of the Ethiopian biblical tradition. And tonight, slowly, gently, we are going to explore it together, word by word, breath by breath. My name is Pastor Michael, and if you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, I am so glad you found your way here tonight. This channel exists for one purpose: to walk you gently into rest, using the deep wisdom of the Ethiopian biblical tradition, the Book of Enoch, and the ancient Ge'ez manuscripts that have been read under oil lamps in Ethiopian Orthodox churches for more than 1,500 years. Tonight, we are going deep into 1st Enoch, chapters 6 through 11, the account of what happened when the Iron the Watchers descended. I want you to know one thing before we begin. The word Iron, in the ancient Aramaic and Hebrew of the earliest manuscripts, does not simply mean angel. It means the wakeful ones, the ones who never sleep, the ones who watch without ceasing. Tonight, they're going to watch over you as you rest. Before we go deeper, a quiet word. If this kind of deep sleep content helps your nights, if you find that ancient wisdom carries you into rest better than anything else you've tried, consider subscribing so that every new journey we take together finds its way to you. And I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Leave a city or a country below. Even just one word, knowing that someone in Lagos or London or Addis Ababa or Sydney is resting to the same words, makes this sacred space a little more whole. By the end of this section, you will know why the mountain itself carries the memory of the oath carved into its name for eternity. There is a principle in the ancient Semitic world that a name is never arbitrary. A name is a record, a compressed archive, a stone tablet carved with the essence of a thing's deepest truth. And nowhere is this principle more starkly illustrated than in the name of the mountain where 200 watchers made their fateful covenant. Mount Hermon. Say it slowly in your mind as you breathe tonight. Hermon. In Hebrew, the root of that name is HRM, Kerem. Mount Hermon in Hebrew Har Chermon, Mountain of the Oath or Mountain of the Curse. The same root word, cherem, in ancient Hebrew law meant a binding oath so severe that breaking it carried automatic destruction. Historical context. The Phoenicians called the same mountain Sirion. The Amorites called it Senir. But the Israelite scribes, and more importantly, the Ethiopian Ge'ez tradition that preserved the Book of Enoch, retained the name that carried the oath, Hermon. In 1 Enoch chapter 6, verse 6, the text specifically says, "And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it." The mountain stands today on the border of Syria, Lebanon, and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, rising to 2,814 meters. Snow covers its summit for most of the year. Even now, the mountain keeps its silence and its memory. I want you to feel the weight of what that means. The mountain was not named Hermon before the angels descended. The mountain was named Hermon because of what they did there. Think about that for a moment. As your breathing slows, the oath they swore, the kerem they made, was so significant, so seismic in its consequences, that it literally renamed the geography of the earth. There is a place on this planet that you can visit today that carries in its very name the echo of a decision made before recorded human history. And that is not poetic metaphor. That is the literal etymological record preserved in the oldest manuscripts of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church in the Ge'ez language Book of Enoch, the only complete surviving copy of that ancient text in the entire world. Now, why does this matter to us tonight? Because names carry memory, and memory carries meaning. And meaning, when it is ancient enough and true enough, carries healing. The Ethiopian monks who read these manuscripts in the mountain churches of Lalibela, in the island monasteries of Lake Tana, a place we explored in a previous journey. When we studied the 10 rooms of Enoch's map of heaven, those monks understood that the geography of the ancient world was also the geography of the spirit. Mount Hermon was not just a physical location. It was a threshold, a place where the boundary between heaven and earth was thinner than elsewhere, where beings of one order crossed over into another. And as you lie here tonight, with the weight of your own day slowly releasing from your shoulders, I want you to notice something. You also stand at a threshold each night, the threshold between waking and sleep, between the world of tasks and the world of rest, between the outer noise and the inner quiet. That threshold is holy. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the hour of night prayer, called Lelit, is treated as a sacred liminal space, a moment when the veil between the seen and the unseen grows thin. You are in Lelit right now, and the mountain we are about to climb, the story we are about to enter, is perfectly suited for this hour. Let me tell you more about what Hermon looked like in the ancient world. In the geography of the Levant, Hermon was the northernmost peak of the anti-Lebanon mountain range. It dominates the landscape for hundreds of miles in every direction. On a clear day, Its summit can be seen from as far south as the Sea of Galilee. From the Negev desert, ancient travelers could orient themselves by that white peak gleaming on the northern horizon. The psalmist wrote about it in Psalm 89. Tabor and Hermon shout for joy at your name. Hermon was not an obscure, forgotten hilltop. It was one of the most recognizable landmarks in the entire ancient Near East, and that is exactly why the Watchers chose it. When you want to make a statement that the whole world will remember, you do not gather in a hidden valley. You gather on the summit that everyone can see. The Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch chapter 6 gives us the precise moment in language that has survived for over 2,000 years in the Ethiopian tradition, preserved by the deacons and scholars of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, copied by hand in the monasteries of Axum, of Debre Damo, of Lalibela. The text says, "And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters, and the Watchers the iron saw them." That is where this story begins. Not with rebellion, not with malice, but with sight. They saw, and they desired, and they made a decision. But before we follow them down the mountain, before we enter the full story of the descent, I want you to understand who they were, because you cannot fully feel the weight of what they gave up until you understand what they were. Rest here for just a breath. You now know something that most people who have walked past a map of the Middle East have never paused to consider. That mountain you can see on the border of Syria and Lebanon, that snow-capped peak that appears in satellite images and hiking blogs and geology textbooks, is carrying a name that is literally a monument to the most consequential oath ever sworn by angelic beings. The mountain is a memory, and the memory is still there. Before this section ends, you will know the actual Aramaic title, the earliest manuscripts used for these beings, and why that title changes, everything about how we understand them. The word that the oldest manuscripts of the Book of Enoch use for these beings is iron. In Aramaic, the language of the earliest fragments of the Book of Enoch, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, iron means the wakeful ones. Iron plural, Aramaic form, watchers, or more precisely, the wakeful ones, from the root meaning to awaken, to be alert, to remain awake. In Daniel 4:13 and 4:17 of the Hebrew Bible, the same word appears. A watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. The Aramaic Enoch fragments from Qumran dated 200, 150 BCE consistently use iron for these beings. The Ge'ez translation, the Ethiopian version, renders it as Exiaver in some passages, but preserves the watcher category separately from standard angels, indicating a specific class of celestial beings with a specific function to observe. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church teaches that the iron were among the highest order angels, not fallen angels in their original state, but beings of extraordinary authority whose primary duty was to watch over the affairs of humanity from above. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, let this image settle gently. Since before the creation of humanity, since before the first sunrise ever lit the face of the deep waters, there were beings whose entire existence was given to watching. Not watching in the sense of idle curiosity, but watching in the way that a shepherd watches a flock in the night, in the way that a mother watches a sleeping child, in the way that a guardian watches a gate. The Iron were the night watchers of heaven. They held vigil over the world below, and they knew every human being who had ever drawn breath on this earth. They had watched the first man name the animals in the Garden of Eden. They had watched the first rainfall. They had watched the first city be built, and the first song be sung. Their watching was not distant or impersonal. According to the Ethiopian tradition preserved in the Ge'ez manuscripts, the Iron felt what they watched. They were not neutral observers. They were beings of deep feeling, deep attention, deep care, and that is precisely what made the descent possible. You can only fall in love with something you truly see, and the Watchers saw humanity more completely than humanity has ever seen itself. They saw the beauty of the human form, yes, but they also saw something deeper. They saw the longing in human hearts, the reaching, the unfinished quality of a being made in God's image, but still so vulnerable, so fragile, so mortal. The Ge'ez tradition, echoed in the Ethiopian Orthodox liturgical commentaries, suggests that the desire of the Iron was not merely physical, it was a longing for connection, a longing to be known by something that did not already know everything. In heaven, among beings of pure light, there are no surprises. There is no discovery, no unfolding, no, I didn't know that about you. But among humans, there was mystery and mystery. For a being who had watched since before time began was intoxicating. Now, the Book of Enoch gives us a specific number, 200. Not a handful of restless spirits, not a small company of the weak-willed. 200 Iron. Organized, deliberate, led, descended together. And they were not the lowest rank of celestial beings. The Ethiopian tradition, drawing on 1 Enoch chapters 6 through 8, describes the Iron as having been assigned to watch over the second and third heavens, regions we explored in our last journey through Enoch's map of heaven. They were beings of considerable authority, considerable knowledge, and considerable power. The text of 1 Enoch chapter 6 tells us, "And all the others together with them took for themselves wives from among them, whom they chose, and they began to go into them and to defile themselves with them. But before that, there was the covenant. Before the descent, there was the oath. And the oath is what we need to understand." The Ge'ez language Book of Enoch, preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, the only canon in the Christian world that still includes the full Book of Enoch, as scripture tells us that Semjaza, the leader of the Iron, said something that is remarkable in its honesty. He said, "I fear that you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall be made to atone for this great sin." He knew it was wrong. He knew the consequences, and he said, "But I am afraid to go alone." And every one of the other 199 watchers said, "We will all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing." They swore together, so that no one would be alone in the guilt. 200 voices under a sky full of stars on the summit of the highest mountain in the Levant, binding themselves to a decision they already knew heaven would not approve. Let that breathe for a moment. 200 beings who never needed sleep, who never felt cold or tired, who had watched the world since before mountains existed, stood together in the night and chose, not out of ignorance, but out of longing. There is something in that is almost heartbreaking. Before we leave this part of the story, you will have heard the actual names of the 20 leaders of the Watchers' names that appear in the oldest Ge'ez manuscripts and have been read aloud in Ethiopian monasteries for centuries. In the ancient world, a name was not just an identifier. A name was a key that, when spoken correctly, in the right context, could unlock understanding, memory, and presence. The Ethiopian Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch chapter 6 verse 7 gives us 20 names, 20 leaders of the 200 Watchers, 20 beings who organized, directed, and led the descent to Mount Hermon, the 20 chiefs of the Watchers, from 1 Enoch 6 to 7. 1. Semjaza, my name has seen, or Shem, sees, the leader. 2. Arstikapha, Earthshaker. 3. Amun connected to the Armenian Highland tradition. 4. Kakabael, Star of God. 5. Turel, Mountain of God. 6. Rumiel variant, Ramiel, Thunder of God. 7. Daniel, God is my judge, a name shared with the prophet. 8. Zekiel, connected to lightning. 9. Barakiel, lightning of God. 10. Azazel, God has made variant of Azazel in some manuscripts. 11. Hermoni, named directly from Mount Hermon itself. 12. Matarel, Rain of God. 13. Ananel, Cloud of God. 14. Setuel, Keeper of Boundaries. 15. Samuel, Herd of God. 16. Turel, variant of Turel. 17. Yomiel, Day of God. 18. Serial, also Serial, Command of God, appears in Ethiopian liturgy. Ondokus. Ezekiel, Strength of God. 20. Azazel, Strong One of God, or Goat of Departure, the most significant name among them. These names are preserved in the Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch, the Ethiopian recension, the Aramaic fragments from Qumran, and partially in the Greek Enoch text. The Ethiopian version is the most complete and is considered the canonical form by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Several of these names, Sariel, Barakiel, Kakabael, appear in Ethiopian Orthodox prayers and protective liturgical texts called Mazmur, which are still sung in churches today. I am going to read those names again. Slowly, let each one settle in the air around you as you breathe. Semjaza, Arstikapha, Kakabael, Star of God. Turel, Mountain of God. Barakiel, Lightning of God. Daniel, God is my judge. Serial, Command of God. And Azazel. Notice something as you listen to those names. Almost every single one of them contains the name of God. El, the Hebrew word for God, appears in Kakabael, Barakiel, Daniel, Sariel, Ezekiel, Turel, Ananel, Samuel, Yomiel, Azazel. These were not rogue spirits who had always been outside heaven. These were beings whose very names proclaimed their origin in God. Their identity was inseparable from the divine. And yet, they descended. I think about this sometimes when I cannot sleep. I think about the fact that beings who carried God's name in their own names could still choose something that moved them away from their original purpose. And I find something strangely comforting in that. Not because I celebrate the choice they made, but because it tells me that the capacity for longing, for reaching, for wanting something more than what we currently have, is not uniquely human. It runs deeper than humanity. It runs through the fabric of created being itself. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition does not read this passage as simple moral failure. The great Ethiopian scholar and bishop Abba Gorgoreos, writing in the 16th century, described the descent of the iron as a cosmic rupture, a tearing of the membrane between orders of creation that were meant to remain distinct, not because the iron were evil, but because they were in the wrong place, at the wrong level of creation. A river is beautiful in its bed, but destructive when it overflows. The iron were powerful, luminous, knowing, and when that power, that luminosity, that knowing, mixed with the fragility and beauty of human existence in ways never intended, the results were catastrophic for both. I want to pause on the name Hermione for a moment, number 11 in the list. One of the 20 leaders of the Watchers was named Hermione, which means one of the Watchers was named after the mountain where they swore the oath, or the mountain was named after him. The scholarship is divided on this, but what is not divided is the intimacy of the connection between this being, this decision, and this place. The mountain and the oath and the angel are so intertwined in the ancient memory that they share a name, and that name has survived 4,000 years to reach you tonight. Between section reflection style, wonder, 20 names, 20 keys, 20 beings who carried the name of God in their own names, stood together on the summit of the world and chose the earth over the sky. Rest with that as your breathing deepens. Before this chapter of the story fades, you will understand the exact moment Semjaza hesitated and what happened when he asked the others to share his guilt. There is a moment in the book of Enoch, chapter 6, verse 3, that I have come back to more times than I can count. It is the moment that tells me this text was written by someone who understood the deepest mechanics of how decisions are made, how guilt is distributed, and how communities sometimes bind themselves together in shared wrongdoing because no one wants to carry the weight alone. The Ge'ez text says, and I want you to hear this slowly, Semjaza, their leader, said to them, I fear that you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of this great sin. Read that again in your mind. He already knew it was wrong. He already knew there would be a penalty. And his first concern was not whether to do it, but whether he would be left to carry the guilt alone. Semjaza, from Hebrew roots Shem and Chaza, my name has seen, or he whose name sees far. Some Aramaic scholars read it as, the name is a vision. In the Aramaic Enoch, fragments from Qumran cave fear, Semjaza appears as the undisputed leader of the Watchers. The Ethiopian Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch consistently names him first among the 20 chiefs. He is distinct from Azazel, who has a different and, in some ways, darker role in the narrative. Semjaza leads the organizational rebellion. Azazel spreads the corrupting knowledge. Semjaza appears in a striking fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Book of Giants, also partially preserved in Jez, where his sons, the Nephilim, dream of terrifying visions before the flood. His name echoes through Jewish mystical literature, Kabbalistic texts, and the liturgical poetry of the Ethiopian church. What happened after Semjaza voiced his fear? The text tells us immediately, without hesitation, that the other 199 watchers answered him. They said, "Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this deed." And so they swore, all 200 of them, on the summit of Mount Hermon, under the stars they had helped to hang in the sky, swore at Jerem, a binding oath curse that locked them together in a shared decision. I find this detail profoundly human, even though these were not human beings. How many times have we said in our hearts, "I am afraid to do this alone, so let us all do it together"? How many times have we found comfort in shared wrongdoing, because the weight feels lighter when it is distributed? The Ethiopian monastic tradition teaches that this is one of the most dangerous spiritual patterns. A community can fall into what the monks call the fellowship of the oath against wisdom, when a group binds itself together not in pursuit of truth, but in mutual protection against the consequences of a shared mistake. Semjaza, whose name means the one who sees, saw clearly that what they were about to do was wrong, and he did it anyway. But he did not do it alone. Let me tell you what we know of Semjaza's character beyond this moment. In the Book of Giants fragment, the text that runs parallel to sections of 1 Enoch, and that was found in Aramaic at Qumran. Semjaza is depicted as a being in anguish. After the descent, after the children are born, after the earth begins to fill with the violence and chaos that followed, Semjaza has a dream. In his dream, he sees 200 stars fall from the sky. He watches them fall, and he understands what the dream means. The text says he woke from the dream in great fear, even after he had led the descent, even after the oath was sworn and the decision irreversible. He still felt the weight of what was coming. He knew the one whose name means he who sees kept seeing, and what he saw was judgment. In the next chapter of this journey, we will talk about the one who walked beside Semjaza, in leadership but in a very different direction. The one whose name has echoed through theology and mythology and the deepest corners of Ethiopian sacred scholarship, Azazel. As your body grows heavier and the night deepens around you, breathe out any weight you carried today. Semjaza carried his weight for 200 years before judgment came. You do not have to carry yours past this breath. Before this piece of the story settles, you will have a clear visual picture of exactly how the Book of Enoch describes the moment of descent, drawn from the oldest Ge'ez manuscripts of the Ethiopian tradition. I want to take you there, not to frighten you, but to show you something astonishing. Close your eyes a little more. Let the image form softly. It is the early world. The air is clean in a way that is almost unimaginable to us now. The stars overhead are not dimmed by any city light. They fill the sky so completely that the darkness between them is almost the exception, not the rule. The earth below Mount Hermon is lush with the first forests, the first rivers, the first settlements of the children of men. Cooking fires glow in the valleys. The sound of singing rises up through the night air. And on the summit of Hermon, 200 beings of pure light gather. They do not need fire to see. They do not need food to sustain themselves. They have stood in the presence of the Holy One, and they carry that light within themselves like a torch that was never lit, because it was never dark to begin with. The Ethiopian Ge'ez verb werde is used both for the descent of the Watchers and for the descent of God's messengers in blessing. The word carries no inherent moral valence, it simply means coming down. What matters is WHO descends and WHY. In 1 Enoch 6:2-6, the text says, they descended in the days of Jared. Jared being the father of Enoch, whose name, Yared, means he descended in Hebrew. The Ethiopian tradition has long noted this parallel. The father of the prophet, who wrote about the descent, was named Descent. In Ethiopian Orthodox liturgical tradition, the figure of Jared, Yared, is also connected to the legendary musician Yared, the 6th century composer of Ethiopian sacred music, who is said to have been divinely inspired. The Ge'ez word were is used today in Ethiopian church services in the phrase, the Spirit descended during the liturgy of the Eucharist. Every time an Ethiopian Orthodox priest uses that word in the service, it carries an echo of this ancient narrative. The Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch chapter 6, verse 6 says, and they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared, on the summit of Mount Hermon. 200 on the summit, in the days of Jared, whose name means descent. The timing is not accidental. In the ancient Semitic tradition of meaning, nothing in Scripture is accidental. The fact that the descent happened during the generation of a man named Descent was understood by Ethiopian biblical scholars as a cosmic signal. This was the appointed moment, the moment that had been written into the structure of human generations from the beginning. What did the descent look like? The Book of Enoch does not describe it with the drama we might expect. There is no thunder, no earthquake, no splitting of the sky. They simply came down, the way a river comes down a mountain, following the pull of something that was always calling to it from below. I think this is one of the most theologically significant details in the entire text. The descent of the Watchers was not violent. It was not dramatic. It was quiet, inevitable, and chosen. They descended the way choices descend on us, gradually, then suddenly, silently, then irreversibly. The Ethiopian Orthodox commentator Abba Yesahak, writing in the 13th century, described the moment of descent as the drawing of a curtain between two worlds. When the curtain was drawn, the world on one side was never the same again. He meant both worlds, not just the earth, but heaven itself, because heaven is not unaffected by what happens on earth. The Ethiopian tradition is very clear on this. What happens here is felt there, and what happened on Mount Hermon was felt in every register of creation. The ancient valleys below the mountain would have been full of human life, going about its evening routine, cooking fires, children playing before bed, elders telling stories under the stars. None of them knew that on the summit above them, the boundary of their world was about to change forever. That what was coming down the mountain toward them was not a storm, not an army, not a plague, but something stranger and more consequential than any of those things. 200 beings who had existed since before the first star burned were walking toward them in the night, carrying knowledge, carrying power, carrying longing, and a covenant that bound them all to seeing this through to the end. As you rest, let the image of that descent settle around you like snow. 200 lights, coming down a mountain in the night, moving toward a world that didn't know they were coming, and carrying in their hands knowledge that would change everything. Before this part of the journey ends, you will know the exact list of forbidden teachings that one Enoch says Azazel brought to humanity, and why the Ethiopian tradition calls him the originator of violence. When we talk about the descent of the Watchers, we tend to focus on the union with human women, but the Book of Enoch, and especially the Ethiopian Geas tradition, places equal if not greater emphasis on something else entirely. What the Watchers taught, because it was the knowledge they brought down from heaven to earth that unleashed the real catastrophe. Azazel, chief among the Watchers in the transmission of knowledge. The name Azazel in Hebrew is contested. Az plus El equals fierce God or strong one of God, from the root Azal, giving the one who has departed from God. The scapegoat of Leviticus 16-8 bears this same name sent to Azazel in the wilderness, which the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition interprets as a direct reference to the fallen Watcher. In 1 Enoch chapter 8, Azazel is given a specific, detailed curriculum of forbidden knowledge that he taught to humanity: the making of swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the art of making cosmetics and jewelry to enhance beauty and cause desire, the knowledge of metals and their workings, the secrets of root cuttings. Chapter 8 verse 2 says, "There arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways." The Ethiopian scholarly tradition places all of this under the heading of the first introduction of violence into the world. The name Azazel appears in the Yom Kippur liturgy of Judaism, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in Arabic Islamic tradition as Azazel, and in the protective prayers of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Let me read you what the Geas text of 1 Enoch chapter 8 says, carefully. "And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets, and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways." I want to sit with that list for a moment, because at first glance, it might seem strange. Swords and bracelets, weapons and beauty products. What is the connection? The Ethiopian Orthodox theological tradition offers a profound answer. The monks and scholars of the Ethiopian Church teach that what Azazel did was not simply introduce dangerous technologies. He introduced the concept of using the external world to compensate for internal emptiness, weapons to project power you don't feel inside, ornaments to create beauty you don't believe you already have, antimony on the eyelids to make the eyes appear larger, more luminous, to simulate the light that the Watchers themselves once radiated naturally. Azazel taught humanity to simulate divinity through things, and in doing so, he introduced the first form of what the Ethiopian tradition calls Mester Yemeshet, the mystery of substitution, trading the original for a copy, the real for the performed. The other Watchers also brought knowledge, according to 1 Enoch chapter 8. Semjaza the leader taught the art of enchantments and root cuttings. Hermon taught the releasing of enchantments, sorcery, and witchcraft. Raphael taught astrology, the reading of the stars as omens. Kakabael taught the constellations and their meanings. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of the clouds. Archangel taught the signs of the earth. Samuel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the courses of the moon. But from the reaching of open hands toward the divine, Azazel taught hands to grip swords. The psalm teaches hands to stretch open toward God. The contrast could not be more complete. We explored in our video on Enoch's map of heaven how the 10 rooms of the heavenly palace were organized according to levels of divine knowledge. The Watchers' error was not that they knew too much, but that they brought knowledge to a level of creation that was not yet ready for it. A seed in the wrong season does not bear fruit. It rots, or it grows wild, in ways the gardener never intended. Rest now. Breathe. The knowledge Azazel carried is no longer a danger to you tonight. You are in the safe space of ancient understanding, where knowledge is held gently and given back to its source. Breathe out. Let go. Rest. Before we move any further, you will know the actual meaning of the word Nephilim and why the Ethiopian tradition sees them as tragic, not simply monstrous. There is a kind of grief that exists for beings who never asked to be born, who came into existence carrying contradictions that were not of their making, who were, from their very first breath, too large for the world they inherited. The Nephilim, from Nephal, the fallen ones, or those who were caused to fall, from an Aramaic root meaning the ones who cause others to fall. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, renders the word as gigantes, giants, from which we get the English giants. But the Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch uses a more specific term, Gibberin, from the Hebrew Gibberim equals mighty ones, heroes, warriors of renown. Genesis 6-4 uses both terms in the same verse. The Nephilim were on the earth, and also afterward they were the mighty men, Gibberim, who were of old the men of renown. 1 Enoch chapter 7 states that the Nephilim were 3,000 cubits tall. A cubit is approximately 18 inches, meaning 3,000 cubits equals 4,500 feet equals nearly a mile. The text is not meant to be taken literally on this point. The Ethiopian tradition reads it as hyperbolic emphasis on their in-between nature, too large for the world of men, but not belonging to the world of angels. The Nephilim appear in Genesis 6-4, Numbers 13:33, and throughout 1 Enoch, the Book of Giants, Qumran, and Ethiopian Ge'ez tradition. Their fate is deeply tied to the reason for the flood in both Hebrew and Ethiopian accounts. The Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch chapter 7 says, "And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood." This is a hard passage, and I want to read it carefully with you, not to disturb your rest, but because understanding the Nephilim's tragedy is essential to understanding why heaven responds the way it does. The Nephilim were hungry. That is the word that runs through the entire chapter. They consumed. They devoured. They could not be sustained. They were born with appetites that the earth could not satisfy, because they were beings whose nature required more than the earth had. They needed celestial sustenance. But they had human bodies. They needed angelic space, but they lived in earthly dimensions. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition reads the Nephilim with deep compassion, not simply as monsters to be destroyed, but as the victims of a cosmic mistake. Abba Gorgorios wrote, "The children of the iron were not born in sin of their own will. They were born in the overflow of a desire that was not theirs. Their tragedy was that they were neither one thing nor the other, and the world is not built for the in-between." How many people do you know who have felt that way? Not fully belonging to one world, not fully at home in another, too much for some rooms, too little for others? The Ethiopian tradition uses the story of the Nephilim to speak to the universal human experience of feeling between worlds and the suffering that comes from it. The Book of Giants, found in Aramaic fragments at Qumran and partially in Ge'ez, gives us something extraordinary, the Nephilim's own perspective. In one fragment, two of the giant sons of the Watchers, Oya and Haya, have dreams that terrify them. Oya dreams that 300 trees are cut down and only one remains. Haya dreams of a tablet being submerged in water. They bring these dreams to Enoch because they do not know what to do with them. And even in their terror, even in their violence, they reach. They reach for the man who walks with God, because they do not know how to walk with God themselves. There is something in that reaching that moves me deeply. These beings who had consumed and destroyed and devoured, still, in the midnight hour of their fear, reached for holiness, because that is what created beings do. Ultimately, we reach toward our source, even when we have moved the furthest from it, the earth. Under the weight of all this, the violence, the consumption, the corrupted knowledge, the giants who consumed without satisfaction began to cry out. In the next moment of this story, we will hear what that cry sounded like and who heard it. But first, rest and breathe. Every soul that has ever felt too much for this world, every heart that has reached for something it could not name, is held tonight in the same mercy that held even the Nephilim in their terrible in-between. I want to be honest with you for just a moment. There are nights when I read these pages, when I study the cry of the earth in 1 Enoch chapter 7, and I feel the weight of it in my own chest. Not because I understand every theological detail, but because I recognize the sound of a world that needs help and doesn't quite know who to call. I felt that too, and if you're here tonight, I think maybe you have as well. You are not alone in that, and neither was the earth. Heaven heard, and heaven answered. That is the rest of this story. Before we turn the page on this part, you will hear the actual words. The earth cried to heaven, preserved word for word in the oldest Ge'ez, manuscripts of Enoch. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, there is a concept called the Tseloya Medre, the prayer of the earth, the idea that the land itself, the soil, the forests, the mountains, can cry out to heaven in the language of suffering. It is not metaphor. In the Ethiopian tradition, it is literal cosmology. The earth is not a silent stage on which the drama of human history is played. The earth is a participant, a witness, and ultimately, a petitioner. In the Giaz text, the phrase used is Zawata Medra, literally, the petition of the ground, a formal legal term. The earth does not simply cry, it files a complaint. It brings a formal petition before the divine court. The legal framework of 1 Enoch chapter 8 verse 4 is striking. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. The earth's cry is framed as a legal accusation, a lament and petition, addressed to the throne of heaven. The Ethiopian tradition identifies this as the origin of the concept of righteous complaint, that suffering which is unjust has the right to be heard in heaven's court. Modern relevance. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has a liturgical tradition of Zikir Medr, prayers offered on behalf of the earth, especially during droughts, famines, and environmental disasters. These prayers are understood as continuing the ancient tradition of the earth's petition before the divine court. Let me read you the cry of the earth from the Giaz text of 1 Enoch chapter 8. And men, being destroyed, cried, and their voice reached unto heaven. That's the first petition, the cry of dying human beings. And then in chapter 9, the 4 great archangels hear it. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. I want you to feel the movement of this narrative. Humanity suffers, earth cries, heaven listens. This is not the arc of a story that ends in abandonment. This is the arc of a story that ends in response. And the response, when it comes, is precise and thorough and complete. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition specifically honors the 4 archangels mentioned in this passage. Michael Michael is the patron archangel of Ethiopia. There are more churches in Ethiopia dedicated to Saint Michael than to any other figure. The largest Ethiopian Orthodox celebration of the year is held on the 12th of Hidar, the Ethiopian month that falls in November, a festival of Michael that draws hundreds of thousands of pilgrims to Axum, to the Church of Mary of Zion, to the island monasteries of Lake Tana, and it is Michael who stands at the center of 1 Enoch's response to the earth's cry. Not coincidentally, the 4 archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel appeared together in 1 Enoch chapter 9 inches, a scene that the Ethiopian tradition describes as the convening of the heavenly court of justice. They look down from heaven. They observe the blood and the lawlessness, and they do not act immediately. Instead, they bring the case before the Most High. They say, and I want you to hear this slowly, Thou art the Lord of lords, and God of gods, and King of kings, and God of the ages, and the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious, and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou, and all things are naked and open in thy sight, and thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. Even the archangels bring their case in prayer. They do not simply act on their own authority. They do not simply judge and execute. They go before the throne and they pray, and in that prayer, they name what was done. They name Azazel. They name the eternal secrets. They name the blood, because the Ethiopian tradition teaches us you cannot receive justice for what you will not name. The earth named its suffering. The archangels named the cause. And heaven heard both. If there is something in your life tonight that has been crying out for justice, if there is a wound that has been waiting to be seen and named and heard, breathe it out gently toward whatever you call heaven. The archangels are still praying tonight, and the throne still listens. Before this piece of the story settles, you will know the specific assignment each of the 4 archangels was given, and the one detail that appears only in the Ethiopian Gez version of 1 Enoch, and nowhere else in the ancient world. 4 archangels. Let that number settle for a moment. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the number 4 carries immense theological weight. 4 directions, 4 winds, 4 rivers of Eden, 4 faces of the living creatures in Ezekiel's vision, 4 pillars of the heavenly throne in the book of Enoch, and 4 archangels who stand, always, before the throne of the Most High, ready to be sent wherever heaven needs a hand. The 4 archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael. Who is like God? The rhetorical question. As name, asserting the incomparability of the divine. Uriel, light. Fire of God, the illuminating presence. Raphael, God heals, healing of God, the physician of heaven. Gabriel, strength of God. God is my strength, the herald. All 4 appear in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Gez Book of Enoch, in the Book of Tobit, Raphael, in the New Testament, Gabriel, Michael, and in the Quran, Jibril, Gabriel, Mikhail, Michael. The unique detail in the Ethiopian Ge'ez version of 1 Enoch chapter 9 is the specific assignment of each archangel as told to them directly by the Most High. Uriel is sent to Noah. Raphael is sent to bind Azazel. Gabriel is sent to the Nephilim. Michael is sent to Semjaza. No other ancient text gives this specific 4-fold assignment. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the 4 archangels are venerated on specific feast days throughout the year. Michael's feast alone is celebrated 12 times annually. Their icons line the walls of every Ethiopian Orthodox church. In 1 Enoch chapter 10, God speaks to the 4 archangels separately, and each receives a specific, precise assignment. To Uriel, go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come. To Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, and cast him in. Cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire. To Gabriel, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of the watchers from amongst men. Send them one against another, that they may destroy each other in battle. And to Michael, go, bind Semjaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation. 4 missions, 4 archangels, 4 layers of restoration. This is what the Ethiopian tradition calls the fourfold healing, the divine response that addresses every level of the catastrophe. Uriel warns the innocent. Noah. Raphael binds the source of corrupted knowledge, Azazel. Gabriel addresses the violence of the Nephilim. Michael deals with the leaders of the descent, Semjaza and his associates. Nothing is left unaddressed. Not the warning, not the binding, not the violence, not the leadership. In the Ethiopian Orthodox liturgical tradition, the prayer of the Trisagion, Holy, 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 is understood as the continuous song of the 4 archangels before the throne. They never stop singing it, even while they carry their assignments, even while Raphael is in the desert of Dudael, even while Michael is binding Semjaza. They sing and they serve simultaneously, because in the Ethiopian understanding of the angelic life, worship and service are not separate activities. To serve is to worship is to serve. And tonight, as you rest, that principle can be yours too. Even your rest is a form of worship. Even your breathing is a prayer. 4 archangels, watching, assigned, serving. Let that surround you tonight like 4 walls of an ancient stone church, lit by oil lamps, smelling of incense, filled with the sound of Ge'ez's chant drifting up into the dark sky. You are held. Before we go deeper into what happened next, you will know the specific words Uriel used when he appeared to Noah, and the unique detail the Ge'ez version includes that no other ancient source preserves. Of the 4 assignments given by heaven in 1 Enoch chapter 10, the one given to Uriel is perhaps the most intimate. Raphael will perform a binding. Gabriel will oversee a judgment. Michael will conduct an imprisonment. But Uriel is sent to a single man, to one human being walking in a world that is about to end, to tell him, hide yourself, prepare. What is coming is real. Uriel, light of God, fire of God, from Hebrew, light, fire, plus El, God. Uriel is the archangel of illumination, the one who brings divine light into dark situations. Not the blinding light of judgment, but the clarifying light of warning. Uriel appears in 1 Enoch, 2 Esdras, an apocryphal Jewish text, the Book of Jubilees, and in the liturgical tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ge'ez text of 1 Enoch chapter 10 verse 1 says, Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spoke, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching. The unique detail in the Ge'ez version. The text says, Uriel appeared to Noah in the form of a shepherd, a detail not found in any non-Ethiopian version of 1 Enoch. The Ethiopian tradition has long understood this to mean that divine warnings come in forms we can receive not as overwhelming light, but as a familiar face, a trusted form, a gentle presence that says, Pay attention to this. The Ethiopian Orthodox feast of Uriel is celebrated on the 11th of Hermon. Ethiopian priests invoke Uriel specifically in prayers for wisdom, clarity, and protection against deception. I want to think about Noah for a moment. Before he was the man who built an ark, before he was the patriarch of a new world, he was just a man, living in an age of catastrophe, surrounded by Nephilim, surrounded by corrupted knowledge, surrounded by the consequences of a world that had received too much, too fast, from beings who had not been sent to give it. And into that world, an archangel came, not with lightning and thunder, not with a terrifying display of divine power. In the form of a shepherd, there is a pastoral tenderness in that detail that I find deeply moving. When heaven wants to warn someone who is surrounded by overwhelm, it doesn't add to the overwhelm. It comes quietly, familiarly, in a form the person can receive. A shepherd among shepherds. That is Uriel to Noah. And Uriel says, hide yourself. Not because you are wrong, not because you've failed, but because what is coming requires preparation, not confrontation. The Ge'ez tradition reads Noah's response as immediate and unquestioning. He did not ask for signs and wonders. He did not demand proof. He built. And this is where the Ethiopian tradition diverges, most interestingly, from the Western reading of the Noah story. In the Ethiopian Orthodox interpretation, Noah's Ark is not primarily a survival vessel. It is a prayer in wood. It is a man's physical response to divine instruction. A 108-cubit-long act of faith, built plank by plank, while the world around him continued its violence and its appetite. The Ge'ez commentary tradition notes that Noah worked on the ark for 100 years. 100 years. Building something no one around him could see the point of. Building something for a catastrophe that had not yet arrived. Building because a figure in shepherd's clothing had told him to prepare. The Ethiopian tradition calls this Tezkar Selam, the memorial of peace, the idea that preparation for the future is an act of reverence for the present. Noah's Ark was not panic, it was patience, made physical. It was faith, expressed in measurement and wood and pitch. And as you breathe tonight, as your body settles into the dark and the quiet, I want to offer you this thought. You are in your own ark tonight. This space of rest you have prepared for yourself. This bed, this room, this hour of chosen quiet is your act of preparation, your act of wisdom, your Tezkar Selam. Uriel's voice tonight says to you what he said to Noah. Rest. Prepare. The morning will come, and you will be ready for it, because you chose to rest. Breathe in the image of the shepherd. Breathe out the need to be warned louder than a quiet voice can reach. Heaven's messages come in the form you can receive. Rest and listen. Before we turn the page on this part, you will know the exact location where the Book of Enoch says Azazel was bound, and the extraordinary detail that connects this place to the ancient Hebrew Day of Atonement. There is a place mentioned in 1 Enoch chapter 10 that has fascinated biblical scholars for centuries. A place called Dudael, or in some manuscripts, Dudael, or Beth Hadudael. This is where Raphael was instructed to take Azazel. Dudael, the place of Azazel's binding. The exact etymology of Dudael is debated among scholars. One reading, Beth Hadudael, House of the Cauldron of God. Another, from Duda, a kind of jar, plus El equals the jar of God, God's vessel. The Ethiopian Ge'ez text describes it as a place in the great desert with rough and jagged rocks. Some scholars have identified it with the wilderness of Beth Hadudo near Jerusalem. The key linguistic connection Leviticus 16 to 8 to 10 describes the scapegoat being sent La Azazel to Azazel on the Day of Atonement. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition explicitly reads the Leviticus scapegoat ritual as a commemoration of Raphael's binding of Azazel in the desert. The scapegoat carries the sins of Israel into the wilderness, back to the one who introduced sin's methods into the world. 1 Enoch 10 to 4 to 8 gives specific instructions. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. The instruction continues, and on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire. The Yom Kippur scapegoat ritual of ancient Judaism, described in Leviticus 16, is understood in both Jewish mystical tradition and Ethiopian Orthodox theology as directly referencing this binding. The Hebrew text of Leviticus 16 to 8 says one goat is for God, one goat is for Azazel, a real entity, not a symbolic term. I want you to feel the texture of this scene. Raphael, whose name means God heals, is sent on a mission that is, at its core, a medical act. He is going to heal the world by removing the source of infection. He is going to bind the one who taught swords, who spread the knowledge of the metallurgy of destruction, who introduced the substitution of the real with the performed, and he is going to cover Azazel's face so that Azazel cannot see the light he once carried until judgment comes. There is a particular mercy in that detail, covering Azazel's face. The Ethiopian tradition reads this not as cruelty, but as compassion, because the worst torment for a being of light is to see the light it has lost and know it cannot return to it. To cover his face is to extend a kind of mercy to the fallen one. Raphael, the healer, even in performing the binding, heals. The gaze, commentary tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, makes a beautiful observation about the name Raphael in this passage. They note that Raphael's name, God heals, is answered by his action. He is not called God punishes or God destroys. He is called God heals. And yet he performs what looks like punishment. Because in the deepest understanding of the Ethiopian tradition, healing sometimes requires the removal of what causes harm. A surgeon's scalpel is not an instrument of punishment. It is an instrument of healing, even when it cuts. Breathe out anything that has been weighing on you tonight, and know that in the ancient understanding of these texts, those weights have an address and a healer. Raphael is still the name of God's medicine. Before this chapter of the story fades, you will understand why Gabriel's assignment was the most complex of the four, and what the Ethiopian tradition says about the spirits the Nephilim left behind. Gabriel, the Archangel we know best from the New Testament, the one who appeared to Mary, the one who spoke to Zechariah at the altar of incense, the one whose name means strength of God, or in some readings, God is my warrior. In 1 Enoch, Gabriel appears in a very different context, and his assignment is the most complex and in some ways the most heartbreaking of the four. Gabriel, strength, warrior of God. From Geber, strong man, warrior, plus El, God. In the Ethiopian J's tradition, Gabriel is Gabriel, sometimes translated as servant of God, from Giez Gabra, servant, worker. The Ethiopian reading gives Gabriel a softer profile, not just a warrior, but a servant warrior, one who serves through strength. In Enoch 10:9, God's instruction to Gabriel is, "And to Gabriel said the Lord, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of the watchers from amongst men. Send them one against another, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have." The method is significant. Gabriel does not destroy them directly. He turns them against each other, causing the Nephilim to destroy themselves. The Ethiopian tradition reads this as a form of justice that allows the consequences of the Watcher's choice to play out through the nature of what they created. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has a specific feast day for Gabriel, on the 19th of every Ethiopian month, 12 times per year. Gabriel is invoked in Ethiopian protective prayers, in prayers for strength in adversity, and in prayers at the beginning of difficult tasks. The Ethiopian tradition has a particular teaching about what happened after the Nephilim destroyed each other. 1 Enoch, chapter 15, addresses this directly, and it is one of the most philosophically significant passages in the entire text. The text says that when the Nephilim died, their spirits did not go where human spirits go, because they were not fully human. And now the giants, who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. Let that breathe for a moment. The spirits of the Nephilim, because they were between worlds in life, remain between worlds after death. They are not in heaven. They have no angelic nature complete enough to return. They are not at peace. They have human longing without the capacity for human rest. The Ethiopian tradition names these wandering spirits Ye-Wus Tebabat, the ones who search from within, beings perpetually seeking something they cannot find. This is one of the most sobering passages in all of 1 Enoch, and yet it is not hopeless, because the same God who assigned Gabriel to address the Nephilim is the same God who, in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, is understood to have ultimate authority over all spirits, including those that wander. The Ethiopian Church's exorcism prayers, the Melka prayers, and the Salam hymns are specifically designed to address the wandering spirits of those who are between worlds, whether physically, spiritually, or emotionally. They invoke the 4 Archangels. They call on the authority of Enoch, who walked with God. They use the name of the Most High, and they say in Gehez, a phrase that translates as, "Return to your source, you who have wandered from it." Gabriel's assignment was not simply destruction. It was reorientation, forcing the Nephilim back toward their origin point, even through conflict, even through self-destruction. There was a trajectory being corrected. The warrior servant of God, serving through strength, turning chaos back toward its own source. I find in Gabriel's assignment a strange kind of mercy. He didn't have to crush the Nephilim from outside. He redirected the energy that was already in them toward its natural conclusion, because the only way out of in-between is to choose a direction, and Gabriel helped the Nephilim, even in their violence, to move, to stop being suspended between worlds, and to complete their trajectory. If there is anything in you tonight that feels in between, a decision unmade, a feeling unnamed, a grief unplaced, breathe it toward its direction. You don't have to be suspended tonight. You can choose rest. And rest is a direction. Before this moment passes, you will know the exact number of generations for which Semjaza and his associates were bound, and the remarkable calculation that Ethiopian Orthodox scholars made from that number. We come now to the final and most solemn of the 4 assignments. Michael, the Archangel, whose name is a question. Who is like God? The name that asserts, by asking, that no created being, not even the greatest among the archangels, can compare to the Most High. Michael is given the final assignment because it requires the most gravitas. He is sent to Semjaza himself. The 70 generations, the duration of Semjaza's binding. 1 Enoch 10:12 says, "Bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated." Valley of the earth in the Ge'ez text is Muden Meder, literally, the bowels of the earth, a phrase used in Ethiopian Orthodox theology for the deepest stratum of created existence. The 70 generations is one of the most studied numbers in all of Enoch scholarship. Ethiopian Orthodox scholars, calculating from the genealogy of Genesis, placed the Watcher's descent in the generation of Jared, the 6th generation, from Adam, and calculated 70 generations forward. The result places the end of the 70 generation binding at approximately the period of the Second Temple, the very period when 1 Enoch was being copied and circulated most widely in Judea and Ethiopia. This was understood as a sign the texts were being spread at the moment. The ancient binding was nearing its term. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church includes the Book of Enoch in its biblical canon, specifically because the Church Fathers believed the text was essential to understanding the full scope of cosmic history, including the binding of the Watchers and its implications for spiritual warfare. Michael's instruction from the Most High in 1 Enoch chapter 10 says, "Go, bind Semjaza and his associates who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation." Notice the timing. Michael is told to wait until after the Nephilim have destroyed each other, until Semjaza has seen the destruction of his children. This is the most painful detail in the entire account. Semjaza, the leader who feared to go alone, who gathered 200 companions in his guilt, who led the descent with his eyes open, had to watch. He had to watch his children tear each other apart, and only after that was he bound. The Ethiopian tradition reads this as the completion of a circle. Semjaza gathered a community in shared guilt. The dissolution of that community, including the destruction of what they created, was the final teaching before judgment. I do not read this as cruelty. I read this as the logic of consequences. When you gather people in the service of a decision that moves away from truth, eventually the community built on that foundation dissolves. It was Semjaza's community that descended together, that swore together, that descended into earthly flesh together, and its dissolution was the final message of what that oath had truly bound them to. Michael's binding is not described in dramatic detail in 1 Enoch. There is no battle, no struggle, no resistance from Semjaza. The Gia's text simply says the binding was accomplished, because by the time Michael arrives, Semjaza is already broken. He has already seen, he already knows. The man who feared to go alone ended completely alone. 70 generations, bound in the valleys of the earth. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, this passage is read during the Feast of Saint Michael. It is one of the ancient Ge'ez readings that reminds the congregation of Michael's role as the binder, the judge, the final word of heaven's justice. And yet, even here, the word used for Michael in the Ethiopian church is not warrior or destroyer. It is Amlak-Geta, the servant of the Lord, the highest archangel, the one who asks, "Who is like God?" identifies himself as a servant, and that is the deepest teaching of this entire passage. The greatest is the one who serves. We have now traveled through the full arc of the Watcher's story, from the summit of Mount Hermon, where the oath was sworn, through the descent into the world, through the teaching of forbidden knowledge, through the birth of the Nephilim, through the cry of the earth, through the prayer of the 4 archangels before the throne, through the warning to Noah, the binding of Azazel, the redirection of the Nephilim, to the final binding of Semjaza in the valleys of the earth. We have walked the whole circle, and now it is time to rest in it. The story is whole. Nothing is unaddressed. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is abandoned. Every cry was heard. Every wound was named. Every leader was found. Rest in that wholeness tonight. And now, beloved, we cross the threshold from the hall of knowledge into the room of rest. You have been faithful tonight. You have listened well. You have let ancient words find their way into the quiet places in you. And now, the most important thing you can do is rest. Let your body grow heavier. Let your shoulders drop just a little further than they already have. Let the breath come and go without any effort on your part. It knows how to breathe. You don't have to manage it. Just let it happen. The mountain of Hermon is under snow tonight. The stars above it are the same stars that witnessed the oath of the iron. They have been burning for 4,000 years since that covenant was made, and they burn still. Steady, patient, faithful. You are a small and precious life beneath those same stars, and you are held. Uriel has given you warning. You are prepared. Raphael has done his work. The source of corrupted knowledge is bound. Gabriel has reoriented what needed to find its direction. Michael has sealed what needed to be sealed. You are safe. The night air over the anti-Lebanon mountains is cool and clean. The cedars of Lebanon sway in a wind so gentle it barely makes a sound. Far below the summit of Hermon, in the ancient valleys, the cooking fires have burned down to embers. The children are asleep. The elders have said their final prayers. And the night is full of something that is not quite silence, and not quite sound. It is the breathing of a world at rest. There is no more story to learn tonight. Only this breath, this weight of the body finding its place in the dark, this stillness that is not emptiness, but fullness. The fullness of a day completed, a story heard, a journey made. Sleep now. You have been to the mountain. You have heard the oath. You have watched heaven respond, and now heaven watches over you. Imagine the mountain. After everything, after the covenant was sworn, after the descent, after the knowledge was spread, after the Nephilim were born, after the Archangels came, after the binding, after the flood waters rose, and the old world sank beneath them. Imagine Mount Hermon afterward, still there, still snow-capped, still dominant over the horizon, as if nothing had happened. But the mountain knew. Rocks carry memory. In the Ethiopian tradition, this is not poetry. It is theology. The stones of the earth are witnesses, silent but certain. And the stones of Mount Hermon witness the most consequential event in the pre-flood world. 200 lights gathering, 200 voices speaking, 200 hands raised in an oath that the mountain itself was named for afterward. Let that image settle around you as you breathe. The mountain, still and patient. In the spring, after the snow melts, waterfalls pour down the slopes of Hermon. The Jordan River, whose name means the descending one, begins its long journey to the sea from the springs at the base of this mountain. The descending river. Born at the foot of the mountain of the oath, let your thoughts be like that river tonight, descending slowly through the landscape of this day, past the stones of memory, past the waterfalls of feeling, down and down and down, toward the Sea of Sleep. The Jordan flows south from Hermon through the valleys of the Galilee, through the Sea of Galilee, where ancient fishermen once mended their nets. In the early morning light, continuing south through the Jordan Valley, past the ancient crossing point of Gilgal, past Jericho, until it reaches the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the surface of the earth. The lowest point, 330 meters below sea level, where even the water rests, because it cannot go any lower. Let your body find its lowest point tonight. That place in you that is past tension, past thought, past effort. The place where you simply are. The snow on Hermon melts slowly through the summer months. You can see it from the valleys below, white against the blue sky, shrinking week by week as the warm air climbs, until by August only a small cap remains at the very summit. And then the autumn comes, and the rains begin, and the snow returns, and the mountain is covered again. The mountain breathes with the seasons, white in winter, green and rocky in summer, cloud-crowned in autumn, clear-peaked in spring. You breathe with the night in the same way. The day covers you in its demands and its tasks and its noise, and the night returns. And gradually, slowly, layer by layer, the snow of stillness comes back, covering the rocky parts, softening the hard edges, quieting the voices. There is a Ge'ez word I want to give you for tonight's sleep. It is the word Ser-At, which means the order of things, the pattern that holds creation in its proper arrangement. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition teaches that sleep is not an escape from Serat. It is a participation in it. The body knows that it needs rest, and rest is part of the order of things. You are not failing tonight by sleeping. You are not wasting time. You are fulfilling the Serat, the sacred order of a life that knows when to move and when to rest, when to speak and when to be quiet, when to understand, and when to simply trust. The mountain carries its name in the Serat. The river carries its direction in the Serat. Your sleep carries its restoration in the Serat. Let the Serat hold you tonight. The snow falls very slowly on the upper slopes of Hermon, each flake turning in the dark air, finding its place on the surface of the mountain, adding its small weight to the great white silence. You are like that tonight, finding your place, adding your small weight to the great white silence of a world that is resting alongside you. Enoch went to the mountain. The book of Enoch tells us that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, the one who walked with God and was not, because God took him, was brought to see Mount Hermon as part of his heavenly journey. He saw it from above, from the perspective of one who had already left the earth behind him. And from that height, the mountain looked different. From above, it was just a mountain. Beautiful, ancient, patient, a white-capped peak among the folds of the earth, no more threatening than any other feature of the landscape, no more significant than any other fold of rock and soil. And yet Enoch wept when he saw it. The Ethiopian tradition says that Enoch's tears over Hermon were not tears of fear or grief. They were tears of understanding, the tears of someone who sees from a higher vantage point that what seemed like catastrophe was also part of a pattern, that what seemed like abandonment was also held in a larger plan, that even the cherem, even the oath curse, even the descent was woven into the fabric of a story that was moving toward wholeness. Enoch saw the mountain from God's perspective, and from God's perspective, nothing is beyond redemption. Nothing is beyond reincorporation into the sacred pattern. Even the mountain of the oath, even the place of catastrophic choosing, still standing, still beautiful, still pointing toward heaven. Let your eyes be like Enoch's eyes tonight, looking back at this day from a slightly higher place, from the perspective of someone who has rested, who has stepped back, who has let the stillness of night give them some altitude. What did this day look like? From above, not from the ground level view of urgency and reaction and pressure, but from the view that sees the whole arc, the whole pattern. In that view, every difficulty was also a teacher. Every confusion was also a clearing in progress. Every moment you felt in between was also a moment of transition, moving you from one form of understanding to a deeper one. Enoch saw the Watchers from above too. He saw them not as monsters or villains. He saw them as beings who made a choice and lived its full consequences, and in living those consequences became a warning and a teaching for every generation that came after. We are the generation that came after, and tonight we have heard the warning and received the teaching. Enoch walked with God and was not. The Ge'ez text says he was translated to Nesphah literally. He was lifted across, not destroyed, not escaped, not fled. He was lifted across the boundary between this world and the next, as gently as a thought being lifted from waking into dream. You are being lifted across that boundary tonight. Not permanently, not forever, just for these hours of night, across the threshold of waking, into the quiet country of sleep, where the body repairs, the mind rearranges, the spirit rests. Enoch looked back from the other side of his threshold and saw beauty in the morning. When you cross back into your day, I pray you will look back at this night and see rest. Real, deep, restorative rest. The kind that fills the empty places. The kind that quiets the loud places. The kind that readies you for the day that is not yet here. The book of Enoch says he walked with God for 300 years after the birth of his son Methuselah. And then God took him. 300 years of walking with God, not running, not striving, not achieving, walking at walking pace, one step at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time. That is the pace of tonight, one breath at a time. In the monasteries on the islands of Lake Tana, the great lake in the heart of Ethiopia, source of the Blue Nile, home to ancient churches built on islands that have never been conquered, monasteries where the light falls in golden sheets through the acacia trees. In the early morning, in those monasteries, the monks wake before dawn to pray. They do not use alarm clocks. They have learned, over centuries, to wake at the same hour because their bodies have been trained by the rhythm of prayer. At 4 inches the morning, when the lake is perfectly still, when the hippos have found their places in the shallows, when the fish eagles are not yet awake, the monks of Lake Tana begin to chant. In Yes, the language that has carried these stories for 2,000 years, the Kibra Nagas, the Glory of Kings, is the great Ethiopian national epic. It tells the story of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and the birth of their son Menelik, and the bringing of the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia. But woven through the Kibra Nagast, in passages that the monks of Lake Tana know by heart, are echoes of the Watcher narrative. The Kibra Nagast speaks of the angel Zatanael, a variant form of the fallen ones, and of the ways in which celestial beings can be drawn toward earthly creation. It speaks of the Queen of Sheba as a woman of such wisdom that she could hold the attention of the wisest king on earth. And it speaks of the way that wisdom and beauty, rightly ordered, can bring the things of heaven down to earth, not destructively, not through an oath curse, but through the right kind of descent, gift, blessing, the movement of wisdom from above to below, as a flowing of water from a higher place to a lower. The Watchers brought knowledge to earth through forbidden union. Solomon and Sheba brought wisdom to earth through righteous meeting. One descent created chaos. The other descent created a kingdom. Both descents came from the same human longing to bridge the space between heaven and earth, between the high and the low, between the divine and the mortal. But the method made all the difference. The monks who read these texts by lamplight on the islands of Lake Tana know something that most of the world has forgotten. They know that the longing to connect heaven and earth is not a sin. It is an instinct planted by the Creator into every created being. The angels longed for the earth and fell into it. Solomon longed for wisdom and found it in an earthly queen. The monks long for God and find God in the early morning chant, in the Ge'ez words that have not changed in 1,500 years, in the lake that reflects the sky so perfectly that sometimes you cannot tell which is the water and which is the heaven. I want you to imagine that lake tonight. Lake Tana at 4 inches the morning, perfectly still, no wind, no current, just a surface of glass, reflecting the last stars before dawn. You cannot see the bottom of the lake from above at that hour. The reflection of the sky fills the surface so completely that the lake looks like it contains the entire universe. Your mind is like that lake right now. at rest, still, reflecting, not empty, but calm, not blank, but quiet, holding in its still surface the reflection of everything above it. The sound of the monk's chant drifts across the water. You don't need to understand the Giez words to feel their meaning. Kidus, Kidus, Kidus. Holy, holy, holy. The words the 4 archangels never stop singing, now carried across a lake in Ethiopia, in the dark before dawn, by men who have given their whole lives to the practice of this one truth, that the Most High is worthy of endless worship. Let that sound find you tonight. Kidos, Kidos, Kidos. The lake receives the chant and gives it back as silence, and the silence is also holy. The watchers were named for their watching, but they were not the only ones who watched. The stars watched too. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the stars are not simply burning gases in the void of space. They are witnesses. The ancient Giez word for star is kokab, the same root as Kakabael, the name of one of the 20 watcher chiefs. Kakabael, the star of God, the one who was assigned to teach the movement of the stars that the watchers taught humanity to read, are the same stars that watch the watchers descend, the same stars that have watched every human night since then. They are watching tonight, the same stars, older than the oath, older than the mountain, older than the names we have given them. Ursa Major turning slowly overhead, Orion standing in the south, the Pleiades, which the Gaze tradition calls the 7 sisters, and associates with the 7 heavens of Enoch's map. They burn tonight exactly as they burned on the night the iron gathered, on the summit of Hermon. The same light, the same distances, the same patient fire. You are under the same sky, and the sky does not know the difference between the ancient world and this one. From the stars' perspective, everything that has ever happened on Earth is happening simultaneously. A single frame of light in a very long story. The Ethiopian priests who perform the night office, the Lalit prayer service, do so under the open sky when possible, standing in the courtyards of the ancient mountain churches with the stars directly overhead. They chant the same words that have been chanted under these stars for 1,500 years. They are not afraid of the stars. They read them as a text, a library of divine faithfulness, a record of every promise God has made and kept. The star that guided the Magi, still burning, the star of Bethlehem, still in the record of the sky. Sirius, which the Ethiopian calendar uses to mark the new year, still rising before dawn at the appointed time each year. The stars are faithful. They do not move faster than they are supposed to. They do not burn brighter than they are supposed to. They do not fail in their assigned orbits. They are the most visible form of the Serat, the sacred order, written in fire across the night sky. And tonight they watch over you, the same way they watched over the mountain, the same way they watched over the monks of Lake Tana, the same way they have watched over every human being who lay down at night and looked up and felt, for a moment, very small and very held, very small and very held. These two things can be true at the same time. You are small in the great scope of the cosmos, and you are held in the great scope of the cosmos. The universe did not make you accidentally. You are not a random arrangement of atoms that happen to become conscious. You are a deliberate act of creative love, brought into being by the same intelligence that arranged the stars in their courses, that named the angels before the earth was formed, that heard the cry of the earth and sent 4 archangels to answer it. You are in very good hands tonight. The stars are turning very slowly overhead, not fast enough to see, but turning nonetheless. The the great wheel of the sky completing its nightly circle, carrying Orion from east to west, carrying the Pleiades across the meridian, carrying the bears around the pole star, and with them, carrying you through the hours of the night, toward the morning, toward the dawn that is already on its way. There is a peace that exists at high altitude. If you have ever climbed a mountain, or stood on a high plateau, or flown over the peaks of a great range at sunset, you know the kind of peace I am describing. It is not the peace of comfort. It is the peace of perspective from high enough up. The things that feel enormous on the ground begin to look like what they are. Features of a landscape, part of a larger pattern, not obstacles but topography. That is the peace of Mount Hermon, not despite its history, but through it. A mountain that has carried the name of an oath for 4,000 years and has not fallen, has not cracked, has not ceased to be beautiful, is a mountain that has made peace with its own history. I think about that sometimes. The mountains we carry inside ourselves. The places in us that carry the name of difficult things. The oath we regret. The decision we cannot undo. The memory that renamed something in us. Even those mountains can become places of beauty. Even those mountains can be covered in snow in winter and become sources of living water in spring. The Jordan begins at the foot of Hermon. Remember, life-giving water, flowing from the place of the oath. That is the redemptive logic of the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. Nothing is permanently defined by its worst moment. Even the mountain of catastrophic choosing can become the source of life-giving water. The Ge'ez word for peace is salam, the same root as the Hebrew shalom. It means more than the absence of conflict. It means completeness, wholeness, the state in which nothing is missing. Selam, you are moving towards salam tonight, not through striving, not through achieving, but through the simple, faithful act of resting. Your body is healing right now. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your brain is consolidating the learning of the day, organizing memories, clearing metabolic waste, restoring balance. While you rest, you are being restored. That is the biology of sleep, and it aligns perfectly with the theology of the Ethiopian tradition. Rest is not passive. Rest is active healing. The mountain rests in winter. The seeds rest in the frozen soil. The bears rest in their caves. The eagles fold their wings at night and grip their branch and sleep. And the whole creation, from the summit of Hermon to the depths of the Dead Sea, participates in the rhythm of rest and waking, holding and releasing, winter and spring. You are part of that creation, not separate from it, not above it, not in conflict with it, woven into it. The way a thread is woven into a fabric, the way a note is woven into a chord. The peace of the mountain is your peace tonight. The stillness of the high places is entering your body now, through the soles of your feet, through the palms of your hands, through the back of your head resting on the pillow. Selam, deep, whole, unbroken peace, the kind that passes understanding, the kind that held the monks of Lalibela through 6 centuries of mountain winters, the kind that held Noah through 100 years of building in a world that mocked him, the kind that holds you through whatever this year has asked of you. Hermon is at peace tonight, and so are you. Breathe with me, in and out, just that, just the breath. This is the oldest rhythm on earth, older than language, older than music, older than fire. The breath was in the world before any of it. The book of Genesis says God breathed into Adam, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. The Ethiopian Gear's word for this act is anfas, breath, spirit, soul. The same word is used for the wind that moved over the waters in Genesis 1-2. The same word is used for the Holy Spirit descending at Pentecost. Anfas, your breathing right now, is a continuation of that first breath. The same anfas that animated the first human body moves through you tonight. You are connected, breath by breath, to the beginning of the story. Let that connection deepen your rest. You are not a recent arrival in a story that is almost over. You are a full participant in a story that began before the mountains were raised and will continue after the stars have cooled. Your part in that story is significant, not because you are famous, not because you have achieved, not because you are known by many, but because you are known by the one who knows all things. And being fully known is the deepest form of significance there is. The Iron were known by God, even in their choice to descend. Even in the Karam they swore, even in the consequences that followed, they were known, and being known, they were responded to, and judged, and assigned their place in the great accounting. You are known with even greater intimacy than that, because the Most High, who sent 4 archangels to answer the earth's cry, is the same Most High who knows the number of hairs on your head, who knit you together in your mother's womb, who was there when you drew your first breath, and who is here tonight. As you breathe, in, out, the night deepens around you. The mountain of Hermon is still in its appointed place in the north. The lake of Tana is still in its appointed place in Ethiopia. The monks are still at their appointed prayers. The archangels are still at their appointed stations. And you are in your appointed place. In this bed, in this room, in this night, in this particular moment of this particular life. There is nowhere else you need to be. The ancient night knows how to hold you. It has held every dreamer who ever lay down under the stars. It has held Abraham sleeping in his tent at Mamre, hearing the promise of descendants like the stars. It has held Jacob at Bethel, the stone under his head, dreaming of the ladder between earth and heaven. It has held Elijah under the juniper tree, exhausted and afraid, and provided food and water and the instruction. The journey is too great for you. Arise and eat. Tonight, the instruction is different. The journey of this day is complete. Tonight, the instruction is rest. Let the night hold you the way it has held every soul who ever trusted it. Let the breath come and go without your supervision. Let the body take over now. It knows what to do. Let the mind grow quiet, like the lake at 4 inches the morning, perfectly still, reflecting the sky, and from above, the sky, reflected in you, is indistinguishable from the real sky. Sleep. You are held. You are known. You are loved. May the one who called Enoch by name call your name in rest tonight. May the archangels who watch at the 4 corners of creation stand at the 4 corners of your sleep, holding back the noise of the world. May the mountain of Hermon, covered in its ancient snow, remind your heart that even the places of difficult choosing can become the source of living water. May the Ge'ez word salam find its full meaning in your body tonight. Completeness, wholeness, nothing missing, nothing broken. You are the sheep of a very good shepherd. He makes you lie down in green pastures. He leads you beside the still waters. He restores your soul. Selam, Selam, Selam. Good night, beloved. 1. Book, manuscript. 1. Enoch, Ge'ez recension, Ethiopian Orthodox canon. 2. Angel figure. Semjaza, leader of the 200 Watchers. Azazel, teacher of forbidden knowledge. 3. Event, date, the Watchers' descent in the days of Jared, pre-flood era. 4. Giezterm, Iron Ear. The wakeful ones, the watchers. 5. Location: Mount Hermon, Archangels, Lake Tana, Desert of Dudael. Let me take you back to the summit. One more time, slowly, because the Night of the Oath deserves more than a summary. It deserves to be sat with, felt, understood from the inside out. It is night on Mount Hermon. The summit is at 2,800 meters above sea level. At that altitude, the air is thin and cold, cold enough that each breath makes a small cloud as it leaves the mouth. Below, the anti-Lebanon valleys are dark. The settlements of the early world, small clusters of fire and shelter, dot the landscape like embers scattered across a dark floor. The 200 iron do not need warmth. They are beings of light. Warmth is not a requirement for them, but I imagine they feel something that functions like cold at that moment. Not a physical cold, but the cold of a threshold, the chill that comes before a decision that cannot be taken back. Semjaza stands at the center of the gathering. He is the first to speak, and what he says first is not a declaration of rebellion. What he says first is an admission of fear. I am afraid that I will be left alone in this. That sentence has haunted me for years. It is the most human sentence in a book about angels. The Ethiopian monastic tradition has a category of spiritual condition they call Yelu Metset, the loneliness of the high place. It is the condition of a being who occupies a position of authority or knowledge that separates them from those beneath them and leaves them feeling profoundly alone in their heights. Semjaza suffered from the loneliness of the high place. He was among the highest of the iron, their chosen leader, and in his heights, he looked down at the warm communities of humanity and felt something he could not name, except as longing. The other iron heard his fear, and they answered it with solidarity. We will all swear, none of you will bear this alone. 200 voices speaking as one. In the high cold air of the summit, under stars that had watched them since before humanity existed, the oath the Karim would have been spoken in the Aramaic of the heavenly court. The Book of Enoch doesn't give us the precise words of the oath, but the Ethiopian scholarly tradition, drawing on the structure of ancient covenant-making ceremonies, has described what such an oath would have contained. A naming of what was being sworn to, a calling of witnesses in this case, the mountain itself and the stars overhead, a statement of mutual accountability. If any one of us turns back, the rest will bind him, a declaration of shared consequence. Whatever judgment falls, it falls on all of us equally. The mountain was the witness, and mountains, in the ancient Near Eastern tradition, do not forget what they witness. This is why the name of the mountain changed that night. This is why the word Karim was woven into the very name Hermon. The mountain received the oath into itself, like a stone receives an inscription, and it has carried that inscription for 4,000 years. I want to ask you something, gently, as you breathe. Have you ever made an oath with someone? A promise made in a moment of intensity that felt like it would hold everything together? A commitment sworn because you were afraid of carrying something alone? If you have, you know the weight of that moment, the feeling of something clicking into place, of now it is real. The iron felt that too, the click of finality on the summit of Hermon, the moment the oath was complete and the descent could begin. In the Ethiopian liturgical tradition, the moment of an oath is accompanied by the words Egziabahur Yetai, may God be a witness. The iron had no such invocation on Hermon. They called the mountain as witness, and the stars, but not the name above all names. And that absence, that gap in the oath, was the first sign of what was already going wrong. An oath sworn without the Most High cannot hold the weight placed on it. A community bound by shared fear rather than shared truth will eventually scatter under pressure. The mountain carried the name of the oath, and the oath ultimately carried the seeds of its own dissolution. But before the dissolution, there was a moment of what felt like unity. 200 beings of light, standing together, facing the same direction, bound by the same words, committed to the same descent, and for a moment, on the summit of Hermon, under the ancient stars, the loneliness of Semjaza was gone. He was not alone. There is something in that is worth sitting with tonight. Not as an endorsement of what they did, but as an acknowledgement of what they were seeking. Connection, belonging, the end of the loneliness of the high place, and the Creator who made them, and who watched the oath, and who would respond in due time with 4 archangels and a flood and a healing, understood that longing, because that longing was placed there by the one who made them. Rest in that knowledge tonight. Your longing for connection is not a mistake. It is your deepest nature, reaching for its source. I want to return to something that I mentioned earlier, and let it unfold more fully now, as your body grows heavier and the night deepens. The names of the 20 leaders of the Watchers, almost all of them carry the name of God. El, Ekul. Let me trace that through each name, slowly, like a prayer. Kakabael, Star of God. Somewhere in the heavens, there is a being whose identity is so wrapped in starlight and divine fire that even his name is a small astronomy. Turel, Mountain of God, a being whose name contains a landscape of divine power, a mountain that exists in the vocabulary of the heavenly court. Raphael, Lightning of God. Imagine a being of light so intense that even the concept of lightning is contained in his identity. A walking, living flash of divine energy, given a name that says, I am the storm, brightness of God. Dan L. God is my judge. Note the grammar of this name. It is a declaration of trust. Not God judges, which could be threatening, but God is my judge, which is a statement of relationship. God is my judge, meaning no other judgment matters as much as his, meaning I have submitted my case to the highest court there is. Samuel, heard of God, a being whose very name carries the assurance that prayers are received. Heard of God, meaning when this being speaks, God listens. Or this being was created in the moment of a divine hearing. Ananel, Cloud of God. In the ancient Near Eastern tradition, clouds were the garment of divine presence. The Shekinah, the dwelling presence of God, moved through the wilderness as a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. A being named Cloud of God carries the garment of divine presence in his name. And finally, the name that carries the most weight in this story. Azazel, Azazel, strong one of God, or the one who has departed from God. 2 readings, 2 possible stories in one name. A name that says, at my origin, I was strong because of God. And a name that says, in my departure, I moved away from that origin. The Ethiopian tradition holds both readings simultaneously, because both are true. Azazel was strong because of God, and Azazel departed from God. And the tragedy is precisely the distance between those two truths. I have thought about this for a long time, about what it means to carry a name that proclaims your origin in God, and then to live in a way that contradicts that origin. And I think there is a mercy in the fact that the name remains, that Azazel did not lose his name when he lost his direction. The name still called him back to what he was meant to be, like a compass still pointing north. Even when you are walking south, your name, whatever it is, carries something of your origin in it too. In the Ethiopian tradition, names are given not arbitrarily but prophetically. Parents pray and consult priests and wait for the name that fits the soul they are sending into the world. And even if your name was given with less ceremony than that, even if it was chosen quickly or inherited without much thought, the tradition teaches that the Creator knows your name before your parents did. Isaiah 49:1 says, "The Lord called me from the womb, from the body of my mother, He named my name." He named your name. You are known by name, by the one who named the Archangels and the Watchers and the stars. Let that name knowledge settle into your rest tonight. You are not anonymous. You are not a crowd. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a name, known and kept in the deepest record of all. Breathe out the sense of being unknown. Breathe in the reality of being fully, completely, tenderly known, from before your first breath to after your last. You are known. The Ethiopian tradition does not end the Watcher story at the binding of Semjaza. It continues through the flood and into the covenant, and through the covenant into the promise, because in the Ethiopian biblical understanding, no story in Scripture ends with judgment alone. Judgment is always the middle of the story. The end is always restoration. After the floodwaters receded, after Noah stepped out of the ark onto the mountain of Ararat, after the animals dispersed into the new world, after the world breathed its first post-flood breath, God made a covenant and hung a rainbow in the sky. The Ge'ez word for rainbow is Keste de Mena, which translates literally as the bow of the clouds. Keste de Mena. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition reads the rainbow as a direct response to the cosmic rupture created by the Watcher's descent. The Watchers brought the violence of unconstrained power into the world. The rainbow says, power will be constrained by covenant from this point forward. The Watchers mixed heaven and earth in a way that destroyed. The rainbow places heaven's color in earth's sky as a sign that the boundary between them has been re-established this time by divine decree. I love the rainbow for this reason more than any other. Not because it is beautiful, though it is. Not because it signals the end of rain, though it does. But because it is God's sign that the unconstrained catastrophe of the pre-flood world has been addressed and will not repeat in that form. Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood. The Most High, who sent Raphael to bind Azazel, who sent Michael to bind Semjaza, who sent Uriel to warn Noah, who sent the flood to cleanse what the Watcher's knowledge had corrupted, also made a rainbow and made a promise. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the rainbow appears in church art, surrounding the throne of God in iconography depicting the divine court. The rainbow is not just a meteorological phenomenon. It is a throne decoration, a reminder that the king's power is always constrained by the king's own covenant. Ezekiel saw it in his vision of the divine chariot Like the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, such was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. The glory of God looks like a rainbow, not like a sword, not like a throne of iron, but like a bow of clouds. Kestedimena. After the flood, Noah planted a vineyard. After the terror, after the year of floating in the dark waters, after the death of most of what he had known, he planted something that would take years to produce fruit. He invested in a future he could not yet taste. The Ethiopian tradition calls this the patience of the just. Yea, Sadek. Tabab the virtue of planting in faith without demanding to eat from the plant today. You have planted things in faith, haven't you? Things you have poured your energy and your hope into that have not yet produced fruit. The vineyard of Noah took years to mature. The promises you carry tonight may take more time than you planned, but the rainbow is still in the sky. The covenant is still in force. And the one who promised does not forget what he planted. Sleep is a kind of planting in faith. Every night you lie down and trust that the morning will come. You can't see it from here. You have no direct control over whether the dawn arrives. But you trust, and you rest. And in the morning, without fail, the light comes back. The rainbow is the sign that this will continue, day and night, seed time and harvest, summer and winter. The rhythm will not cease as long as the earth endures, and you are part of that rhythm tonight, resting in the rhythm, trusting the rhythm, participating in the ancient, faithful cycling of the world. In the Ethiopian Orthodox liturgy, there is a prayer offered at midnight. It is called the Night Office Lalit, and it has been prayed without interruption in Ethiopian churches and monasteries for over 1,500 years. The night office begins with a reading from the Psalms. It moves through a set of ancient hymns, the Mezmor, composed in Ge'ez. Then it includes readings from the scriptures, which in the Ethiopian canon include the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and texts that appear nowhere in the Western biblical tradition. I think about those midnight prayers often, about the priests and deacons who have prayed them in the underground churches of Lalibela, the churches carved out of living rock in the 12th century, churches that descend into the earth rather than rising from it, churches where the floor of the sanctuary is below the level of the surrounding ground. Those churches are themselves a kind of prayer, going down rather than up, finding the holy in the deep places rather than the high ones. And in those underground sanctuaries at midnight for 900 years, priests have read the account of the earth crying out to heaven in 1 Enoch chapter 8. And men, being destroyed, cried, and their voice reached unto heaven. The Ethiopian monastic tradition teaches that the midnight prayer is a form of solidarity with the earth's cry. To pray at midnight is to stand in the gap between suffering and response, to add your voice to the voices of those who have cried to heaven, to say, I am here, I am listening, I will not sleep through the suffering of the world. But there is also a complementary tradition, the tradition of the Lalit prayer that says, to sleep well is also holy. To give your body the rest it needs is an act of reverence for the life God gave you. To lie down in trust is a form of midnight prayer in itself, a declaration that you believe the Most High watches over the world. Even while you are not watching, you don't have to be awake for the world to be held tonight. The 4 archangels are not sleeping. The Most High does not slumber or sleep. The Psalm says, He who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. You can rest. Because the watch is being kept without your help. The earth that cried in the days of the Nephilim has been answered. The healing of that ancient wound is ongoing. The restoration has been in motion for 4,000 years, and your rest tonight is a participation in that restoration, not an escape from it. In the Lelit liturgy of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the most beloved sections is the Wedes Mariam, the praise of Mary sung to the ancient Ge'ez melody that dates to Saint Yerd, the 6th century composer who is said to have received his music directly from the 3 birds who taught him the 3 modes of Ethiopian sacred chant. The 3 modes are called Ge'ez, Ezel, and Arare. Ge'ez, the dignified mode used for the great feasts of the Lord. Ezel, the meditative mode used for the seasons of fasting and reflection. Arare, the joyful mode used for the feasts of the saints. Tonight's mode is Ezel, the meditative mode, the slow and gentle chant of reflection, the mode that says, we are not rushing, we are not celebrating wildly, we are sitting with deep things, letting them settle into us like rain, into dry earth. Saint Yerd, the tradition says, was a student who repeatedly failed in school. He was sent away multiple times for his inability to learn. One day, sitting under a tree in his discouragement, he watched a caterpillar try to climb the trunk. The caterpillar fell and tried again. It fell again and tried again. 7 times it fell, and 7 times it tried again. And on the 7th attempt, it reached the branch it was seeking. Yared returned to his studies and became the father of Ethiopian sacred music. The caterpillar did not know it was going to succeed on the 7th attempt. It simply tried again. You do not know which attempt is the 7th. You do not know which morning of rest will be the morning that changes everything. But the pattern of the Ezel mode says, keep returning, slowly, meditatively, without rushing, but without stopping. Each night of rest is a returning. Each morning is a rising that makes the next return possible. Bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth. The valleys of the earth, not the depths of fire, not the darkness of void, but the valleys, the low places of the earth itself. There is something theologically significant in that location. The valleys are not outside creation. The valleys are part of creation. The iron who descended in their judgment, abound within the world they chose to enter. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, this is called the mercy of judgment. Yefete Timhert, the teaching embedded in just consequence. The Watchers wanted the earth, and in their judgment they received the earth, not the freedom of the earth they had imagined, but the limitation of the earth. Its weight, its darkness, its valleys and depths, for 70 generations, a number that, as I mentioned, the Ethiopian scholars calculated to be approximately the period of the late Second Temple era. What does it mean to wait for 70 generations? A generation in the biblical reckoning is approximately 40 years. 70 generations is 2,800 years. 2,800 years of waiting in the valleys of the earth. We struggle to wait 2 weeks for something we ordered online. We struggle to wait 2 months for a medical result. We struggle to wait through one dark night for the dawn. And the iron wait in the valleys for 2,800 years. I do not say this to condemn the iron further. I say it because the duration of that waiting tells us something profound about the seriousness of what they chose. In the Ethiopian tradition, there is a prayer called the Tegbar, a prayer of patient endurance that monks pray when they are in a period of waiting, of not knowing, of in-between time. The Tegbar prayer says in Gez, "In the darkness of the valley, I have not forgotten the light of the summit. I wait for the end that you have appointed, and I trust that the appointment will be kept. Even in the valleys, the summit is remembered." If you are in a valley season right now, a season of waiting, of not knowing, of in-between, where the summit feels very far away and the sides of the valley block your view, the Tegbar prayer is yours tonight. I have not forgotten the light of the summit. I wait for the end that you have appointed. I trust that the appointment will be kept. The valley has a floor, and the floor holds you. The valley has walls, and the walls give shape to the path through. The valley has a direction, and the direction leads out. Eventually, every valley in geography leads somewhere. Every river runs through a valley toward a destination. The Jordan runs through the Jordan Valley to the Dead Sea, but even the Dead Sea is not the end of the water's journey. The minerals and salts that collect there are used over time. As the water evaporates and returns to the clouds and falls again as rain on the mountains, the water comes down from Hermon, runs through the valley, collects in the deep place, and rises again as vapor to the sky, to become rain on the mountains once more. You are in the cycle. Whatever valley you are in, you are still in the cycle. The breath that goes down into your lungs rises again. The energy that rests in sleep rises again in the morning. The soul that descends into grief rises again when the time is right. Trust the cycle. You are held in it. Let me take you inside an Ethiopian Orthodox church at night. Not to study it, but to rest in it. The church is circular. Most Ethiopian Orthodox churches are round, 3 concentric circles, one inside the other. The outer ring for the congregation, the middle ring called the kedist for the communicants, and the inner sanctuary, the Mekdas, where the Ark of the Covenant replica, the Tablet, is kept. The Mekdas is always behind a curtain. The Sitawi, the veil. You never see directly into the inner sanctuary during a normal service. The priest goes in, and the curtain falls behind him, and the congregation waits in the middle ring, hearing the prayers through the fabric of the veil. There is profound spiritual wisdom in that structure. The Holy of Holies is present, and real, and inhabited. But it is not exposed. It is not on display. It is not accessible. By casual looking, you must approach with intention, with preparation, with reverence. At night, after the service has ended, the church is different. The congregation has gone home. The deacons have swept the floor. The priests have closed the outer gate, but inside, one oil lamp burns in the sanctuary. One small flame, keeping vigil through the night, in front of the tablet, in the darkness of the inner sanctuary. In the Ethiopian tradition, this lamp is called the Yelelit Sihai, the light of the night, and it is never allowed to go out. Priests take turns keeping it lit. If a priest is ill, a deacon takes the night watch. The lamp has been kept burning in some Ethiopian churches for centuries. It burns while the congregation sleeps. It burns while the city is quiet. It burns while the stars turn overhead The Yilelitzihai is the church's equivalent of the night office, a silent, wordless prayer that says, even when we sleep, something holy remains awake in our midst. Think of that lamp tonight. In some Ethiopian church in Aksum or Lalibela or on the islands of Lake Tana, a small flame is burning right now. It is burning for you. In a sense, it is burning as a sign that the holy does not sleep, even when the holiest people do. The inside of the church at night smells of frankincense and old wood and lamp oil. In the Ethiopian tradition, frankincense Libanon Ge'ez is the scent of prayer. The smoke of incense carries the prayers of the people upward, mingling with the invisible world, marking the space between the human and the divine with a visible, fragrant presence. Even now, long after the incense was burned, the walls of the church hold its scent. The stones remember. The icons on the walls look different at night. In the daytime, they are vivid, bright gold leaf backgrounds, deep blue robes on the Virgin Mary, red mantles on the Archangels, the 4 living creatures of Ezekiel arranged at the corners of the ceiling. But at night, in the lamp glow, the gold seems to move. The faces of the saints appear to be watching from within the gold, as if the icons were windows rather than paintings, and the people on the other side were alive and present. The Ethiopian church teaches that the icons are not decorations. They are a cloud of witnesses, a term from Hebrews 12:1, a gathering of those who have gone before, whose presence is real in the church, whose prayers join the prayers of the living. The Archangels Michael and Gabriel flank the entrance of nearly every Ethiopian church. Their icons greet every person who enters and every person who leaves. They stand at the threshold, watching. In the tradition of their original calling, Michael and Gabriel are watching over you tonight, from whatever tradition you come from. Whatever your theology, the witness of the Ethiopian church, 1,500 years of unbroken practice, says, the archangels are real, and they are present, and they watch over those who rest. Let yourself be watched over. Let yourself be held in that ancient, faithful attentiveness. One last time. Let me walk you through the whole story, gently, slowly, like a parent retelling a beloved story to a child who is almost asleep. In the beginning, there were watchers, wakeful ones, shining ones, beings of pure light who had stood at the edge of creation since before the stars were made. They watched humanity grow, season by season, generation by generation. They watched the daughters of men walk in the early light, and something in them, something that had always been there but never spoken, awoke, and reached, and longed. They gathered on the summit of a mountain that was not yet named, and their leader said, I am afraid to do this alone. And the others said, we will swear together. And the mountain received their oath into its name. Forever they descended, like stars falling toward the horizon, trailing light through the dark air of the early world. And they met humanity and taught what they knew, some of it beautiful, some of it terrible, all of it too much, too soon, for a world still learning to walk. Children were born who were too large for the world. Knowledge was loose in the world that the world was not ready for. And the earth, that silent, patient, faithful earth, cried out, 4 archangels heard that cry and brought it to the throne, and heaven answered. Uriel went to Noah and said, "Prepare. Rest is coming for the weary world." Raphael went to the desert and bound the source of corrupted knowledge, covering his face with the mercy of darkness. Gabriel redirected the violence of the between-world children back toward their own origin, and Michael went to Semjaza, the leader who feared to be alone, and found him already broken, already alone, and bound him in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations. And then the flood came, and the world was washed, and Noah stepped out onto a new earth, smelling of pine resin and rain, and planted a vineyard, and God hung a rainbow in the sky, Kestedemena, the bow of the clouds, a sign that the unconstrained catastrophe had been addressed, that the covenant of creation would hold, that the earth would continue its faithful cycling. And the story continued. Abraham came, and Moses, and David, and the prophets, and the evangelists, and the Ethiopian tradition that preserved the oldest manuscripts of the oldest texts. And tonight, in a room somewhere in the world, you are resting in the continuation of that story. Your life is a chapter in the longest, oldest, most faithful narrative ever told. The Ge'ez monks of Lake Tana are praying right now. The Yeli Metsihafe burns in some Ethiopian church right now. The stars that witnessed the oath on Hermon are burning right now, and you are resting in the middle of all that faithfulness. You are held by the story. You are known by the storyteller. You are carried through the night by the same faithfulness that has carried every sleeping soul since the first night. Sleep now. Let the watchers watch. Let the archangels stand at their stations. Let the monks pray the Lalit. Let the lamp burn in the sanctuary. And let your breath be the only prayer you need to pray tonight. In, out, in, out. There is a sound that exists nowhere else in the world. A sound that has not changed in 2,000 years. The sound of the Ge'ez language being chanted in an Ethiopian Orthodox church. Jizizananchint, Semitic language, related to Hebrew and Aramaic, but distinct from both, that evolved in the kingdom of Aksum, in what is now northern Ethiopia, somewhere around the 1st century of the Common Era. It was the language of the Aksumite kings. It was the language chosen for the translation of the Bible. When Christianity came to Ethiopia in the 4th century, it was the language in which the Book of Enoch was copied and preserved and read aloud in monasteries for 1,500 years. Ge'ez is no longer a spoken daily language, like Latin in the Catholic tradition or Sanskrit in the Hindu tradition. It lives now in the liturgy, in the prayers and chants and readings of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. But unlike a dead language that has become only academic, Ge'ez is still living in the mouths of priests and deacons who have memorized hundreds of hours of sacred text, in the voices of monks on the islands of Lake Tana, in the schools attached to Ethiopian Orthodox churches, where children still learn to read the ancient script. The Ge'ez alphabet is called the Fidel. The word fidel means letter, the same root as the Latin fidelis, meaning faithful. The faithful letters. The letters that have been faithful to their sounds for 2,000 years, carrying the exact pronunciations of words that were spoken in the court of the Queen of Sheba, in the monasteries of Aksum, in the reading of 1 Enoch, by lamplight in the 10th century, in the teaching of the Kebra Nagast to young novice monks in the 15th century. The Fidel has 33 base characters, each of which has 7 forms, 1 for each vowel sound. 33 times 7 equals 231 individual characters. A child learning to read Ge'ez must memorize 231 characters before they can read a single sentence of scripture. This is why Ethiopian Orthodox biblical scholarship is deep. If you have learned to read these texts at all, you have already committed to years of dedicated study. You have already proved, before you read a single word, that you are serious about what the words will say. The sound of Ge'ez being read aloud is unlike any other language I know. It is rounded and resonant, full of sounds in the back of the throat that the European ear is not accustomed to, sounds that carry the weight of the ancient world in them. When a Ge'ez chant begins, there is a quality to the sound that I can only describe as before time, as if the language itself predates the era that shaped it, as if it carries in its vowels and consonants the memory of the world before the flood, the world of the Watchers and the Nephilim, the world Enoch walked through on his way to the divine. Some of the monks on the island, monasteries of Lake Tana, can chant from memory for 6 consecutive hours without pause. 6 hours of continuous Ge'ez chant, accompanied by the sistrum, a kind of rattle, and the prayer staff, moving in the slow circular dance of the Ethiopian liturgy. 6 hours in the middle of the night, while the lake is still, while the hippos sleep in the shallows, while the fish eagles dream on their nesting branches, while the stars complete their slow rotation overhead. And you, in your room, wherever you are in the world tonight, in Lahore, or Lagos, or London, or Addis Ababa, or somewhere entirely different, you are resting in the same night that holds those monks. The same darkness holds you all. The same stars arc overhead. The same morning is coming for all of you. If you were with us for our last journey, the map of heaven, the 10 rooms of the divine palace, you may remember that Enoch passed through multiple heavens on his way to the throne. Tonight, I want to take you through those heavens gently, as a kind of meditation, a way of moving your mind upward through increasingly still and peaceful layers, like rising through the atmosphere, layer by layer, each layer thinner, quieter, more luminous than the one before. The first heaven, in the Ge'ez tradition of one Enoch, is the heaven closest to the earth. It is the heaven of clouds and weather and seasons. The Watchers who taught Ezekiel the knowledge of clouds had their assigned place in this heaven. It is the heaven of ordinary miracles, of rain that falls at exactly the right moment, of snow that covers the mountain with perfect evenness, of the frost that forms on the window at precisely the temperature that the air and water require. Breathe up through the first heaven tonight, through the clouds and the weather and the rain. Let the ordinary miracles of the atmosphere surround you. The second heaven is the heaven of those who are waiting. In some readings of the Enoch tradition, the second heaven holds beings who are in a state of expectation, neither fully arrived nor still departing, but waiting for the completion of something only the Most High can complete. If you are waiting for something tonight, a result, a resolution, a healing, a return, the second heaven is your place right now. It is not a heaven of punishment. It is a heaven of patience, A heaven that says, "Not yet, but coming. The time has been appointed. Trust the appointment." The third heaven, in the Ge'ez tradition, is the heaven of Eden. Not the earthly garden of Genesis, but the heavenly original from which the earthly garden was a reflection. The heavenly Eden, where the tree of life grows in its full luminosity, where the rivers of paradise flow in their four directions, where the fragrance of the trees is a presence rather than a scent. Breathe up through the third heaven tonight. Let the fragrance of the heavenly garden find you. Not the memory of a lost paradise, but the anticipation of a restored one. The fourth heaven holds the great luminaries, the sun and moon and their angels. In 1 Enoch, the movements of the sun and moon are not automatic mechanisms. They are performed by beings who carry them across the sky in the great chariot paths of heaven. The sun that set tonight was carried to its resting place by angels. The moon that hangs in your window is held in place by watchers who have not rested since the beginning of time. They watch so that you can rest. They carry the lights of heaven so that you can trust the darkness. The fifth heaven in the Ge'ez reading is the heaven of the watchers, the station they left, the place from which they descended. And the text says it is a heaven of great sadness, a heaven of unfilled places, of 200 stations that are empty, of a silence where singing used to be. I find this detail profoundly moving. Heaven remembers the watchers, not with anger, but with grief. Their stations are still marked, their names still known, but the places where they stood are silent now, waiting. If you have ever left a community, a family, a calling, and wondered if you are missed, if your absence is noticed, the fifth heaven says, yes, the place you occupied is still marked. The silence where you were is known. The return is always possible. The sixth heaven holds the angels of knowledge, the recorders, the keepers of the cosmic library, the beings who maintain the great scroll of all things seen and known. Every breath you have taken is recorded there. Every act of kindness, however small, is in the record. Every night of faithfully resting when rest was needed is noted. You are in the record, not as a data point, but as a beloved. And the seventh heaven, the highest, is the heaven where the throne stands, surrounded by the four living creatures, surrounded by the 10,000 times 10,000, surrounded by the rainbow that looks like the glory of God, surrounded by the song that never ends. Hoy, hoy, hoy. Breathe up through all seven, slowly, and let the seventh heaven hold you in its song tonight. In the ancient city of Axum in northern Ethiopia, there are obelisks, tall, slender towers of granite, carved with intricate patterns, standing in rows in the oldest part of the city. Some of them have stood for 2,000 years. The tallest of the fallen ones, if it still stood, would be the tallest ancient obelisk in the world, 33 meters tall. The Axum obelisks were not simply monuments. In the ancient Axumite tradition, they were tombstones, markers for the burial of the kings of the Axumite Empire, the empire that preceded the Ethiopian Christian kingdom. And beneath the obelisks, deep in the rock, are chambers, underground rooms carved into the bedrock of Axum, where the kings and nobles of the pre-Christian Ethiopian world were buried. When Christianity came to Axum in the 4th century, when King Ezana converted and the empire became Christian, the obelisks were not torn down. The Ethiopian church did not destroy the memory of what came before. It incorporated it, held it, let it stand, and built its theology around and through the ancient memory rather than erasing what was there before. This is something I love deeply about the Ethiopian tradition. Its willingness to hold the full span of memory, to let the pre-Christian heritage stand alongside the Christian revelation, to let the Ge'ez manuscripts of 1 Enoch stand alongside the Gospels, to let the story of the Watchers stand alongside the story of the resurrection. Because in the Ethiopian tradition, all of it is part of one story. The whole sweep from creation to consummation, from Hermon to Axum to Lalibela to the present moment. The obelisks of Axum at night are extraordinary. The streetlights of the modern city illuminate their lower sections, but their upper portions disappear into the dark sky, pointing upward toward the stars that have always been their companions. 2,000 years of nights those stones have stood through. 2,000 years of rain and sun and earthquake and empire. And still they point upward. The Church of Mary of Zion stands nearby the holiest church in Ethiopia, the church that houses the Ark of the Covenant, the church that is visited by hundreds of thousands of pilgrims each year, the church where the Ge'ez manuscripts are kept in climate-controlled rooms by the priests who have dedicated their lives to their preservation. In that church, or near it, some of the oldest surviving copies of the Book of Enoch exist, physical manuscripts written by hand on vellum in J script that were copied from older copies that were copied from older copies still, going back ultimately to the earliest Christian era in Ethiopia and perhaps further. I think about those manuscripts sometimes when I read 1 Enoch. I think about the hands that copied this text. The monk who sat in the scriptorium at Axum in the year 900, carefully forming each character of the Fidel alphabet, by the light of an oil lamp, breathing the frankincense that drifted from the sanctuary below, copying the account of the Watchers with the same focused reverence he would give to the Gospels. That monk and I are connected by this text, and you and I are connected by it tonight. The same story, the same characters, the same Hermon, the same Semjaza and his fear, the same 4 archangels and their response, the same earth crying out, the same heaven answering. Across 15 centuries of nights, the text has held, and tonight it holds us gently in the dark. Before we settle fully into silence, I want to do something I have never done in a video before. I want to speak directly to the Iron. Not because I think they are listening, I leave that in the hands of the Most High, but because speaking to them is also speaking to something in us. The part of us that has also chosen poorly in moments of longing. The part that has feared to be alone. The part that has gathered companions for a decision we already knew was wrong, because we couldn't bear to carry the guilt alone. To the Iron, to the 200 who gathered on the summit of Hermon, I am not here to condemn you. The Most High has already addressed what needed to be addressed. Michael has already come for Semjaza. Raphael has already gone to the desert of Dudael. That account is settled, but I want to say this to you. The longing you felt was real. The desire to be known, to be connected, to descend from the heights of your distance into the warmth of the world below. That desire was not evil in itself. It was only the path you chose for meeting it that caused so much harm. And I say this not to excuse the harm. The harm was real. The suffering was real. The flood was necessary. I say this because I believe that no longing placed in a created being is there by accident. The longing the iron felt for connection, for the beauty of the human world, was placed in them by the same creator who made that world beautiful. It just needed to find its proper channel. And perhaps in the eternal economy of the Most High, even the story of the iron serves a channel for that longing. Because tonight, for 3 hours, 200 wakeful beings have held space for a weary human soul to rest. Your story has been the vehicle for someone's peace tonight. Your names have been spoken in the darkness of a bedroom somewhere in the world, and those names have carried their bearer gently into sleep. Semjaza, the one whose name means he who sees. I hope that in the end you see clearly. Kakabael, star of God, I hope you find your way back to the sky that named you. Raphael, lightning of God, I hope your light is returned to its source. Azazel strong, one of God, I hope the strength that was yours from the beginning is restored to its proper use. Because in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the final word of every story is not judgment. The final word is restoration. The final word is all things new. Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21:5. And if all things are made new, then that includes the mountains that carry the names of oaths, and the watchers who sign those oaths, and the wandering spirits of the Nephilim who searched without finding. And you, in your bed tonight, carrying whatever you carry, behold, I make all things new. Rest in that promise tonight. We are near the end of our journey tonight, near the end which is also the beginning of your rest. The candle of awareness is burning very low now. The images of Hermon and Semjaza and the Archangels are dissolving into something softer and less specific, less a story, and more a feeling. The feeling of having been somewhere ancient and important. The feeling of having held something real. The feeling of a journey completed. Your body is very heavy now. Your arms are heavy. Your legs are heavy. Your shoulders have finally let go of the day. Your jaw is soft. Your eyes, behind their closed lids, are still. The muscles of your face, the ones you use to manage expressions, to perform patience and confidence and capability, have released. You don't need to perform anything tonight. Not competence, not composure, not okayness, just rest. There is a Hebrew word, nachath, which means rest, but also means descent. The same word used for Noah's Ark resting on the mountain. The same word used for the dove descending at the baptism of Jesus. The same word used for the Shekinah, the divine presence descending on the tabernacle. Nachath. Rest, descent. The descent into rest. Not falling, but settling. The way water settles into the earth after rain. The way snow settles onto a ledge. The way the sun settles below the horizon at day's end. You are Nachath right now, descending gently into the deep quiet of rest. The watchers descended from Hermon in search of something. You are descending into sleep in trust of something. The difference is everything. The Ethiopian tradition has a final prayer of the Lelit service called the Ye Lelit Selo, the prayer of the night. It is a prayer of surrender. It says in Ge'ez, roughly translated, "Into your hands, O Lord, I place my body and my soul and my spirit for the hours of this night. Guard what I cannot guard. Watch over what I cannot watch. Keep what I cannot keep. And in the morning by your mercy restore me to the service of your love. That prayer is yours tonight. In whatever words feel right to you. In whatever language your heart speaks. The surrender of the night is the same. You are placing yourself into hands that will not drop you. Into your hands, O Lord. Guard what I cannot guard. Watch over what I cannot watch. Keep what I cannot keep. And in the morning, restore me. The morning is coming. It is already on its way. Somewhere on the other side of the earth, the sun is rising over the highlands of Ethiopia, over the waters of Lake Tana, over the obelisks of Axum, over the snow-capped summit of Hermon. The light is coming, but for now, here, in your night, the darkness is good. The darkness is safe. The darkness is the womb of the morning. Rest. The mountain is in its place. The archangels are at their stations. The monks are at their prayers. The stars are in their courses. And you are in your rest. Nachath. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd boy threw a stone into a cave near the Dead Sea. He heard something break. He went inside and found clay jars. In those jars were ancient scrolls wrapped in linen, preserved for 2,000 years in the dry air of the Judean desert. The Dead Sea Scrolls, among the most significant textual discoveries in human history. And among those scrolls, fragments of the Book of Enoch. In Aramaic, the original language of the earliest Enoch texts, written by hand in the 2nd century before the Common Era. The fragments were incomplete, but they confirmed something that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had maintained for 1,500 years. The Book of Enoch was real. Ancien, authentique, pré-Christian, not a medieval invention. Not a later forgery. A genuine ancient text, preserved in Aramaic at Qumran and preserved complete in Ge'ez in Ethiopia. When the Western scholarly world discovered the Qumran fragments of Enoch, the Ethiopian Church had a quiet but significant moment of vindication. For centuries, scholars had dismissed the Book of Enoch as a pseudepigraphical curiosity, a late composition, a text not worthy of serious canonical consideration. The Ethiopian Church had simply gone on reading it, copying it, teaching it, praying the Lalit that included its readings, honoring the Ge'ez manuscripts in which it survived. The shepherd boy who threw a stone into the cave of Qumran was, in his way, continuing a very ancient chain of transmission. The Bedouin who found those jars connected the ancient world directly to the modern. The fragment of Aramaic Enoch that was lifted from a 2,000-year-old jar told the same story that an Ethiopian monk was telling that same week in the liturgy of a Lake Tana Island church. The story survived because it was too important to lose. It survived in stone jars in a desert cave. It survived in Ge'ez manuscripts in highland monasteries. It survived in the memory of deacons who chanted it by heart. It survived in the liturgical calendar of a church that never stopped, treating it as scripture. And tonight it survives in you, in the hearing and the resting and the receiving of it. You are part of the transmission chain tonight. The shepherd boy, the Ethiopian monk, the Qumran scholar, and you, all connected by the same ancient account of 200 lights, gathering on a mountain and making a decision that changed the world. I want to pause on something that we have not addressed fully tonight. The women, the daughters of men who appear in 1 Enoch chapter 6. the human women who caught the attention of the iron. The text does not give them names. The text gives them only a category and a quality. They were beautiful. The Ethiopian Orthodox scholarly tradition has always been careful about this. The women in this narrative were not agents of seduction. They were not responsible for the descent of the Watchers. They did not climb to the summit of Hermon and invite the iron down. They were living their lives in the valleys, by the rivers, under the same stars that the iron watched from above. Abba Gorgoreos, the 16th century Ethiopian scholar, wrote, "The daughters of men are not to be blamed for the beauty the Creator gave them. Beauty is not a sin, it is a gift. The sin is in the one who makes beauty, the object of an oath that was never God's to take." The women of the pre-flood world did not ask for the consequences that came to them. They did not ask to bear children who were too large for the world. They did not ask for the violence of the Nephilim. They did not ask for the flood that followed, and yet they endured all of it. The Ethiopian tradition holds the unnamed women of Genesis 6 in a category it calls Yesalam Shehadat, the witnesses of peace. Beings who endured what was not their doing, who carried consequences they did not author, who were part of a story that needed telling but did not need their blame. If you have ever been caught in the consequences of someone else's decision, if you have ever carried weight that was not yours to carry, if you have ever endured something you did not choose and could not control, the tradition names you tonight as Yesalam Shehadat, a witness of peace, not because you were spared the suffering, but because your endurance is held and known and honored. When the flood waters receded, the world was quieter. The Nephilim were gone, or rather, their bodies were gone. Their spirits, the text tells us, wandered in the in-between places. But the world itself was scrubbed of the most visible manifestations of what the Watcher's knowledge had produced. The weapons that Azazel had taught humanity to make, the swords and knives and breastplates of the early world, were washed away or buried under layers of sediment. The ornaments and the antimony, the art of beautifying the eyelids, gone with the waters. But the knowledge itself, knowledge does not drown. Noah carried knowledge in his memory across the flood. His sons and their wives carried it. The seeds of language and craft and observation survived in the 8 souls that stepped out of the ark onto Ararat. The Ethiopian tradition teaches that the post-flood world was not a world that had been restored to Eden. It was a world that had been cleansed, but not perfected. A world that still contained the seeds of the knowledge the Watchers had spread, now in human hands, human memory, human DNA, and the promise of the rainbow was not, "I will make you innocent again." The promise was, "I will not destroy you for your imperfection." That is a more honest promise, in some ways. Not, "You will never fail again," but, "I will not abandon you when you do." The world after the flood is our world. We live in the post-flood world, with all its complexity and its beauty, and its capacity for both creation and destruction. And the rainbow is still in our sky, and the covenant is still in force. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, there are prayers specifically for the night, and specifically for dreams, because the dream state is considered a liminal space, a threshold where the veil between the seen and the unseen is at its thinnest. Abraham received direction in a dream. Jacob saw the ladder in a dream. Joseph interpreted dreams. Enoch himself, the tradition says, received his first heavenly vision in a dream state. The Ethiopian protective dream prayer is called the Mazmur Ye Lelit, the Psalm of the Night, and it invokes 4 specific protections: the protection of Michael over the east, the direction of the rising sun, the direction of new beginnings, the protection of Gabriel over the west, the direction of endings and completions, the direction of the setting sun, the protection of Raphael over the north, the direction of wisdom and age, the direction of the polar star that guides travelers, the protection of Uriel over the south, the direction of warmth and growth, the direction of the land of Ethiopia itself, which lies south of Jerusalem, pour Archangels, pour direction, pour protection, the same 4 who heard the earth's cry, the same 4 who stood before the throne, the same 4 who were given their assignments and carried them out with faithfulness, now reassigned to stand at the 4 corners of your sleep. Michael, at your east, greeting the dawn that will come. Gabriel, at your west, guarding the door through which the day departed. Raphael, at your north, the healer holding steady watch in the cold direction. Uriel at your south, the light of God illuminating the warm country of your dreams. You are surrounded, not by threat, but by presence, not by surveillance, but by care. The Mazmur Ye Lelit ends with a phrase that translates roughly as, "May your dreams carry you toward the morning with peace, and may the morning find you ready for what it brings. May your dreams tonight be peaceful. May the images that rise in your sleeping mind be gentle and restoring. May the narratives your unconscious weaves be stories of movement and arrival, not of being chased or lost or left behind. May you dream of mountains and waterfalls, and the still surface of a lake reflecting a sky full of stars. May you dream of oil lamps burning in ancient sanctuaries, and the sound of Ge'ez's chant drifting across dark water. May you dream of the rainbow over Ararat, and the vineyard just beginning to take root in the new earth. And when you wake, may you remember, even if only faintly, that you were held tonight, that the story you heard is true, that the mountain of your oath, whatever that is for you, can become the source of living water, that the watchers who watch over you in the night have not left their stations, that the morning is coming, and that you will be ready for it. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition has a beautifully detailed map of what happens during sleep. Not a scientific map, though the tradition has never been afraid of science, but a spiritual map, a theological cartography of the night hours. The tradition teaches that during sleep, the body rests in the earth, but the soul, the nefs in Ge'ez, continues its journey. The nefs does not stop when the body stops. It moves into a different register of existence during sleep, a space that the tradition calls Ye-Lelit Medrek, the country of the night. The Ye-Lelit Medrek is not heaven, and it is not earth. It is the space between them, the same space the Watchers crossed when they descended from Hermon. But in sleep, the crossing is not a descent of betrayal. It is a descent of rest, a temporary visit to the in-between space that allows the nefs to receive from both registers at once. The Ethiopian tradition says the nefs receives 3 things in sleep. First, restoration. The soul is replenished by contact with the deeper dimensions of existence. The anxieties and contractions of the waking state are released. The soul expands back to its natural size, uncompressed by the pressures of the day. Second, instruction. The soul, unguarded by the analytical mind, is more open to divine communication in sleep. This is why the prophets received visions in the night, why Jacob saw the ladder, why Joseph interpreted dreams. The sleeping soul listens in a way the waking soul often cannot. Third, connection. The Nephs in sleep is more connected to the community of praying souls, the monks at their midnight offices, the angels at their stations, the saints in their rest, than the waking soul typically is. Right now, your Nephs is beginning to receive all three. Restoration is already happening. You can feel it in the heaviness of your body, the loosening of the tension that the day tightened. Instruction may come to you tonight in the form of a dream, or in the form of a knowing that arrives, already formed, when you wake. And connection, the deep connection to the cloud of witnesses, to the monks of Lake Tana, to the prayers offered in 1,000 sanctuaries tonight. That connection is present in the very story you heard this evening. You are in the Ye-Lelit Medrek now, the country of the night, and it is safe here. In the deepest part of the Book of Enoch tradition, there is a name that does not appear in the text deliberately, the name that is above all names. In the Hebrew and Aramaic manuscripts, it is written as 4 letters, Yuha, the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, the ineffable name. In the Ge'ez tradition, the Ethiopian equivalent is Exyabier, which means Lord of all, the complete title of divine sovereignty. The name is not spoken casually in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. When it appears in the liturgy, there is a quality of stillness that comes over the congregation, a collective held breath, an involuntary recognition of being in the presence of the name itself. I have been in Ethiopian Orthodox services where the deacons chanted the divine name in the ancient Ge'ez tonality. And there is something in that sound, in the way the voice shapes the syllables of Exyabiher, that communicates reverence through sound alone, regardless of whether you understand the language. It is the sound of someone speaking to something infinitely greater than themselves, with complete trust. The name was not on Semjaza's lips when he led the watchers off the mountain. The oath on Hermon was sworn without the covenant name, sworn to the mountain, sworn to the stars, sworn to each other, but not sworn to the one who named all 4 of them. And perhaps that is the simplest explanation for why the covenant failed. A covenant that does not include the source of all faithfulness cannot ultimately hold, but the covenant of the rainbow, the covenant God made with Noah, was sworn by the name itself. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. The name made the covenant. The name keeps the covenant. The name who made the stars and named the archangels and heard the earth's cry and sent the 4 archangels with their 4 assignments. That name watches over you tonight. Exyabiher, Lord of all. Let that name be the last conscious thought in your mind tonight, before the country of the night receives you. Not as a demand or a petition or an urgent prayer, but simply as an acknowledgement. You are here. I am yours. I trust the night to you. Let me give you one last image to carry into sleep. The image of Lalibela at night. Lalibela is a small town in the highlands of northern Ethiopia. It sits at about 2,630 meters above sea level, almost as high as Hermon. And in Lalibela, there are 11 churches carved out of living rock, not built up from the ground, carved downward into it. The stonemasons of the 12th century Ethiopian king Lalibela did not construct these churches, they revealed them. They removed everything that was not the church. until the church that was already there inside the rock became visible. The most famous is Beta Georgis, the Church of St. George. It stands alone in its own pit, cut square from the top of a rocky hill, descended to below ground level, its roof carved with a triple Greek cross pattern that is only fully visible from above, from heaven's perspective. At night, after the pilgrims have left and the priests have closed the gates, Beta Georgis stands alone in its pit. The stars overhead cannot see it easily. It is below the surface of the earth, but the cross on its roof points upward, a signal sent from below the ground toward above the sky. I think about Beta Georgis when I think about prayer, about the prayers we send upward from the lowest places, about the way the cross, whether carved in rock or held in the heart, is always pointing in the direction it needs to point, regardless of how deep the pit that surrounds it. In the middle of the night, Lalibela is very still. The thin highland air carries every sound clearly. A dog in the distance, a priest beginning the laylit prayers, the bell of a church ringing the midnight hour. The stars overhead are brilliant at 2,600 meters. There is very little atmospheric distortion. The sky seems closer than anywhere you have been. And below you, cut into the rock of the hill, the cross of Beta Georgis catches the starlight on its edges, just barely visible, quietly glowing in the reflected light of 10,000 stars. You are in Lalibela tonight, in your own pit of depth and rest, and the cross on your roof, the thing that orients you, the thing that points you in the right direction, is catching the light of the stars that have watched over this world since before the Watchers stood on Hermon. Sleep in Lalibela tonight, in the ancient rock, below the surface of the busy world, carved out by 10 centuries of faithful hands, surrounded by the prayers of 1,200 years. The rock holds you, the stars watch you, the Lalit prayer rises around you, and somewhere a priest is ringing a bell, and the sound carries through the thin highland air and dissolves into the stars. Good night, beloved. You are held. You are known. You are loved. There is a tradition in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church of reciting the 70 names of God at the end of the Lalit service. 70 names. One for each generation that the Watchers were bound. The tradition notes this correspondence deliberately. For every generation of waiting in the valleys, there is a name of God that covers it. I am not going to read all 70 tonight. This is a sleep video, and the list would take longer than we have in this section. But I want to give you some of the most beautiful ones, in Ge'ez and in translation, and let each one settle into you like a hand being placed gently on a tired shoulder. Exyabiher, Lord of all, the name that contains every other name. Midhani Alam, Savior of the world, the name that says no part of creation is beyond reach. Amlak, God, the simple foundational name that requires no adornment. Heimano, faith, the name that says, I am the ground of all trust. Salam, peace, the name that is both a greeting and a theology. The name that says, completeness is my nature and my gift. Burhan, light, the first word spoken in creation. Let there be light. The name that existed before the sun was made, before the stars were hung, before Hermon rose from the earth. Kidus, holy, the name the 4 living creatures never stop repeating. the name that the monks of Lake Tana carry into the 4 a.m. hour, the name that fills the sanctuary of Beta Georgis even when no one is there. I Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ, the name that the Ethiopian tradition places at the center of its theology and its life and its hope. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, these names are not just titles, they are doorways. Each name opens a room in the understanding of who God is, and the 70 names together create a palace with 70 doors. A palace large enough to contain every generation of human longing, every generation of watcher waiting, every generation of post-flood hope. Tonight, as you sleep, I invite you to walk through that palace in your dreaming. You don't need a map. You don't need a guide. Just walk through one door at a time. Exia Beher. The first door. The door of sovereignty. Medani Alam. The second door. The door of rescue. Berhan. The third door. The door of light in the darkness. Selam. The fourth door. The door of completion. You do not need to reach the end of the palace tonight. 70 doors. 70 rooms. 70 generations of names. The palace was not built to be rushed through. It was built to be explored slowly over the whole span of a life well lived. Tonight, you might get through 3 doors before sleep takes you fully, or 2 doors, or 1. It doesn't matter. The palace is patient, and the doors are always open. The mountain of Hermon stands at the northern edge of the ancient promised land. Psalm 133 says, "It is like the dew of Hermon descending on the mountains of Zion, for there the Lord commanded the blessing life forevermore." The dew of Hermon, the moisture that forms on the mountain each night as the warm air cools and condenses on the cold rock, that descends into the valleys as tiny droplets of pure water. The psalm compares that dew to a commanded blessing, a blessing that is not earned, not requested, not negotiated, simply commanded, and therefore given. The blessing of tonight's rest is that kind of blessing, commanded, and therefore given. He gives rest to those he loves. Psalm 127-2. He commanded the dew to descend from Hermon into the valleys. He commanded the blessing of rest to descend on you tonight. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to make an oath to receive it. Unlike the iron, you don't have to swear a cherem to receive what you long for. The dew comes because the mountain is cold and the air is warm, and the laws of creation bring them together in the night. The blessing comes because the one who made you loves the ones he makes. And tonight, the dew of Hermon is falling on you. Tiny, perfect drops of pure water, each one a blessing, each one a little piece of the commanded grace, falling on you while you sleep. The dew is falling, the mountain is at peace, the archangels are at their stations, the monks are at their prayers, the names of God fill the 70 rooms of the palace, and you are resting in all of it. Salam, salam, salam. Before the iron descended, they kept vigil. For countless ages before that night on Hermon, they stood at their posts in the 2nd and 3rd heavens, watching over a world they had never touched, never walked in, never tasted. They watched children being born. They watched old men die. They watched crops grow and fail. They watched rivers freeze and thaw. They watched the slow turning of seasons in a world where time moved differently than it did in heaven. There is something almost monastic about that image. The monk who rises at 4 a.m. to pray the Lelit, and then returns to his cell in the dark before dawn. He is doing something similar, standing at a post, watching, praying, keeping vigil over a world he has, in some sense, stepped back from in order to serve more fully. The Iron were monks of a kind. Before the oath, beings given to watchfulness, to prayer, to the eternal vigil of attentiveness to the life of the world below. And their falling was a falling away from that vocation. Not towards something better, but towards something they misidentified as better. Every monk who has ever left the monastery for the city knows this feeling. The pull of what seems more alive, more real, more connected, more warm and immediate and human than the cold stone of the cloister. But the tradition teaches the warmth you seek is already in the vigil. It is already in the watching, in the prayer, in the standing at the post. The warmth of connection with the infinite is deeper than the warmth of connection with the finite, however beautiful. The Iron forgot this. Or perhaps they never fully believed it. They looked down at the daughters of men and thought, there is the warmth I need, when the warmth they needed was always already available, in the one who made them, and who had never stopped watching over them even as they watched over the world. Tonight, you don't have to make an oath to receive warmth. You don't have to descend from any height. The warmth is here, in the night itself, in the body at rest, in the breath, moving in and out without effort, in the quiet that asks nothing of you, nothing. The vigil is keeping itself tonight. You can rest because the watch is being kept. You can sleep because the lights are on in the sanctuary. You can let go because the hands that hold the world are not tired and are not sleeping and are not lonely for the earth they made. They are close to it, as close as breath, as close as a name, spoken in the dark, as close as the dew falling on the mountain tonight, as it has fallen every night, for as long as there has been a mountain there to receive it. Sleep now. The vigil is complete. The story is whole. You are held. I want to give you one more gift before we fully surrender to silence. A simple breathing rhythm drawn from the tradition of the Ethiopian Hesychast monks, the monks of the inner stillness, who practice what they call Yilut Serene, the silence of the heart. This is their night breath. Breathe in slowly, counting in your mind to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold gently for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out very slowly, counting to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and rest in the empty stillness after the breath for 2 counts. 1, 2. Do that again in your own time, without my counting now. Just the rhythm. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. Rest for 2. The Ethiopian monks call this the breath of the 8 counts, because 4 plus 4 plus 6 plus 2 equals 16, and 16 inches. Ethiopian numerology is associated with completeness in the human body, the number of joints in the hand, the number of paths in certain healing prayers, the breath of completeness, the breath of wholeness, the breath of salam. As you settle into this rhythm, let the story of tonight dissolve. Let Hermon dissolve into the rhythm. Let Semjaza dissolve into the rhythm. Let the 4 archangels dissolve into the rhythm. Let the cry of the earth, the flood, the rainbow, the monks of Lake Tana, let all of it gently, lovingly dissolve into the simple movement of air in your body. In, hold, out, rest. In, hold, out, rest. The whole story of tonight was carried to you on breath. My breath forming the words, your breath receiving them. Breath is the original transmission medium for sacred wisdom. Before there were manuscripts, before there was Ge'ez or Hebrew or Aramaic, before there were scrolls at Qumran or obelisks at Axum or island churches on Lake Tana, there was breath, carrying knowledge from one living soul to another. And tonight, that ancient transmission has been completed between us. Now the breath asks nothing more of you except to move. In, hold, out, rest. In, hold, out, rest. Good night. You were heard tonight. You were seen. You were carried gently through 200 watchers and 4 archangels, and the crying earth, and the healing desert, and the 70 generations, and the flood, and the rainbow, and the vineyard, and the lake, and the stone churches, and the oil lamp, and the stars, and the dew of Hermon, and the breath of God that was in the world, before any of it. And you are still here, still breathing, still hill. In, hold, out, rest. Salam, salam, salam.